Remember Elon said he's setting out to destroy the woke mind virus?
Yeah.
So basically my movie is the origins of the woke mind virus. We're not just talking about an abortion organization. This really isn't a pro-life episode on Resilient. It's a how did all of this crap happen episode. You can't isolate the killing of babies apart from dealing with cultural Marxism, transgenderism, gender theory, the sexual revolution, paganism, like all this stuff goes together. And you have to be able to deal with these things in totalities.
Seth Gruber is the founder and CEO of the White Rose Resistance, driving change in the battle for life by exposing the chilling realities of America's culture of death. What made you decide to choose this as your fight?
As a pro-life Christian homeschool kid, I actually felt like I didn't have a ton of good answers to my pro-choice friends. And so I picked abortion as my senior project. And so here I am scanning mutilated aborted baby photos, and it changed my life.
Who is Planned Parenthood really?
Once you understand the links between Hitler to Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, this stuff is so shocking. Hugh Hefner,
Founder of Playboy,
provided the founding money to establish SECUS, the pioneer of the weird sex curriculum.
in our schools today.
It's founded by Planned Parenthood's medical director. Have you heard the phrase conflict of interest before?
Millions of women have chosen to abort. And what would you say to those women?
I have friends who are former abortionists.
Yeah.
I'm not here to shame or condemn you. There's hope. There's healing. There's forgiveness.
I don't want to say I'm excited about this episode. I'm excited because of Seth Gruber that's with us. But this is like one of the most important episodes to me because one of the things that I'm most passionate about is the fight for the unborn in America, especially in America, around the world, but especially in America, because the number one death in this country is our unborn through abortion.
That's right.
And so today I have my friend, someone I think is the leader in the fight for life right now, and that's Seth Gruber. So Seth, awesome that have you and your family here today.
Yeah,
and,
thank you, brother. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah.
So appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
We're in such a mess.
Yeah.
In this country. And you talk about a lot of what that mess looks like and how it manifests in different ways. Mm-hmm. Whether that's the border, military, big pharma, food, health, security, sleeper cells. I mean, the destruction of the family. We're in such a mess in this country. And I'm going to simply suggest a very simple thought, that those that murder the unborn cannot be trusted to govern the born.
Yes.
And the longer that we've killed unborn babies and called it a blessing of liberty and healthcare in America, the more it's seared our consciences to tolerate almost any other form of evil as well.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, when you have like an epidemic like this, a crisis like this, I think God raises up like warriors to fight against that. And that's how I see you. You've been kind of brought up in this fight and you stepped into it and are making an incredible impact. Before we get started on the interview, I want to make sure that all the audience knows who you are. And so I have a quick bio that I'm going to read about you. Seth Gruber is one of the most trusted and influential voices in America today, driving change in the battle for life by exposing the chilling realities of America's culture of death. Seth is the founder and CEO of the White Rose Resistance, which has quickly become the fastest growing pro-life ministry in America. The son of a pregnancy resource center director, Seth was helping save unborn children from abortion while he was still in his mother's womb. He has been a voice and a defender for preborn babies ever since then. Seth launches a new book called The 1916 Project, which is already out. You go right to his website and get it. And he's launching a vital documentary that releases tomorrow on X. You have to watch it. I seen the pre-release of it. The 1916 Project is the name of the documentary as well. And again, it drops tomorrow. Check it out on X. At 33, you have become just a passionate worker and just leader in this and leading the church and leading America. I think you're just getting started. I think it's been 2 years now.
Yeah, we launched the White Rose Resistance.
Yeah.
Which is my nonprofit, and the White Rose Resistance made the 1916 Project. We're now the fastest growing pro-life organization in America. And whether you're a Christian or not, if you're listening to this, you cannot ignore or discount the role of Christianity in designing the country that provided you with the freedoms and liberties that we've taken for granted for so long in America. America is a Christian nation, not because all of its people are Christian, but because the ideals and ideas and worldview that provided the basis for the construction of this republic were fundamentally Christian. And so if the church doesn't wake up soon and begin to stand against so many of the evils you talk about, certainly the killing of babies, America, as you know it, will die by suicide. For a nation that kills her own children, is destined to die by suicide. So what we're doing with the 1916 Project is we're just saying, here's all the dirty little secrets of the sexual revolution and the disgusting neo-Marxist, pagan, revolutionary history of the 20th century, and how long these, let's just call them what they are, Marxist, leftist revolutionaries work so hard to tear down the fruits of biblical faith, to tear down the American family, to redefine marriage, to redefine what it means to be human, to redefine the unborn, to redefine parenthood, and usher in neo-pagan revivalism.
Yeah.
But all this stuff goes together. So that's what we did with the film. It's like, you can't just say, don't kill babies. It's like, okay, duh. But there's like a deeper history, and it's far more integrated
Well, so informative.
Most people realize.
I think most people make decisions based off of whether it's pro-life or pro-choice with very little information. And so what I've thought about when I've seen the film is like, this is so informative. And if people took time to watch the 75 minutes of the 1916 Project, they would be able to make a very informed decision of what side to follow on pro-life or pro-choice. And they make it with actual knowledge instead of emotion.
Yeah, amen. And, yeah, that's right. I want to say too, Chad, we're not just dealing with another social issue. We're dealing with, I think, what is, as Christians, we need to call the sacrament of Satan. From a spiritual perspective, abortion is Satan's pride and joy. And then from a political perspective, for people listening and who listen to Resilient, if you're not fired up and convinced that we have to abolish and end abortion and ban it completely in America, let me just tell you something. A conservative movement that does not prioritize the total and complete abolition of abortion as its highest political priority will one day wake up and find that there is nothing left to conserve. If you don't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right. Ronald Reagan and his book, Abortion and the Conscience of a Nation. Did you know it's the only book published by a sitting president while he was still serving in the White House?
No, I did not know
The only book published by a president while he was still president is Reagan's book, Abortion and the Conscience of a Nation. And Reagan had been pro-choice. When he was governor of California, Reagan thought that we should have legal abortion. He repented, changed his mind. He heard a pro-life talk from a woman named Mildred Jefferson, the first black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School, and it changed his life. Mildred Jefferson, by the way, said, today it is the unborn child. Tomorrow it is likely to be the elderly or those who are incurably ill. Who knows but that a little later it might be anyone who has political and moral views that do not fit into the new distorted order. So she was the woman that changed Reagan's mind. He becomes president. He publishes his book, and he says, Abraham Lincoln recognized that we could not survive as a free nation as long as some men could decide that other men are not fit to be free and should therefore become slaves. Likewise, we cannot survive as a free nation today as long as some men can decide that others are not fit to live and can be abandoned to abortion and infanticide. So Reagan said, there is no cause more important than affirming than the transcendent right to life of all human beings, the right without which no other rights have any meaning. So to paraphrase Reagan, if you don't get the right to life right, you won't get any other rights right. By sanctioning and supporting legal abortion in America, what we have said as free Americans, whether we realize it or not, we have said being human is not enough to have human rights. All right, let's like take the gloves off really quickly in how we talk about this issue. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, because America has sanctioned the killing of babies in the womb, we have admitted through our rhetoric and through our policies that being human is no longer enough to have human rights. Chad, did you know that every major secular bioethicist, like 99% of them, so we're talking about like doctors, philosophers, people who think about moral questions, nearly every secular, non-Christian bioethicist in America admits that human life begins at the moment of conception. So follow me here. If the left, who favors abortion, says, we know it's a human, everyone knows that what's in the womb, look at this little baby, everyone knows it's a human being. Oh, but I'm still pro-abortion and I'm going to be voting for Kamala Harris. And you say the reason you're voting for Kamala Harris is because of killing babies. Do you see that clip? Steph Curry from the Warriors. He says, he was asked, who are you voting for? Kamala Harris. Why are you voting for Kamala Harris? Women's rights. I believe we have to protect women's rights for healthcare. We have to kill babies. So they're willing to admit that this thing in the womb is human because human life begins at the moment of conception. So much so that I have a scan. Actually, I'm going to send this to you, Chad. I have a scan on my phone of a Planned Parenthood health booklet published in the 60s before Roe versus Wade, which was the decision that legalized abortion at the federal level in 1973. Planned Parenthood admitted in a health booklet from the International Planned Parenthood Federation in the 60s, it says, abortion kills the life of a baby after it has already begun, and it is dangerous to your life and health. I'm sorry, who just admitted that? That would be Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the world, that performs 33% of the nation's abortions in America every year. 33, a third of the babies killed in America are killed by one organization, Planned Parenthood, founded by Margaret Sanger, who 9 years before Roe versus Wade said, we all know it's a baby. We all know its life has already begun. And it's also super dangerous for you, Mom, if you get abortions. So what happens when we grant humanity to a certain class of individuals, but we deny them personhood rights? We have handed over power to the state to decide which humans qualify for the status of personhood. If they can do it to the unborn, why not to you and me? So we're not just talking about another political or social issue. We're talking about the kind of issue that if you don't get it right, or rather if you get it wrong, everything else falls apart as well. Anyways, I just wanted to rant for a little bit because people that listen to Resilient might be moderate, or they're like, I don't know, maybe we should just kill first trimester babies, but not second and third trimester babies. You know, like Mitt Romney conservatives. You know, there's a lot of people like this in America. They're like, oh, I don't like third trimester abortions because it looks too much like a baby. But, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, you know, I think at that point you should. But then where do you draw the line? If you don't say this thing has a right to life from the moment of conception, when everyone says human life begins, Chad, Peter freaking Singer, the Australian communist who's the abortion industry's favorite pro-choice advocate, he wrote a book called Practical Ethics, I think the year I was born in 1991. Guess what Peter Singer's most popular for, Chad? Supporting the killing of infants up to 1 year outside of the uterus. Up to 1 year old, like a 1 year old, like they just learned to walk.
Murdering a baby.
And you know why? Because he's consistent. Peter's saying, by the way, this old fart's still alive. He's done so much damage to the culture. He won himself a chapter in a book called Architects of the Culture of Death for what he's done to the West. And he says, yeah, pro-lifers are right, Chad. You know how pro-lifers say that like there's no meaningful difference between the unborn baby and the born baby because 6 inches through the birth canal. Okay, but you're Mitt Romney, conservative, and so you don't want to kill babies at point of birth because that's just too extreme. But you're not willing to draw the line at conception when human beings begin. So where do you draw it? And it usually has something to do with mental functions, right? Self-aware, consciousness, and desires. Now we're in dangerous territory. Yeah. Ever heard of suicidality? It's the desire to not want to go on living. So if the baby doesn't have any desires, and therefore they're disqualified from a right to life, which is what Peter Singer argues, then why not people who have suicidal tendencies and don't want to continue go on living? What about Buddhists? Do you know Buddhists try to reach nirvana? Do you know what nirvana is? The eradication of all desires. Now, I'm not sure that's possible, but let's say they did that.
Right.
They would be in the same position as the fetus who doesn't have a desire to go on living. Can we kill them? Well, self-awareness. Oh, the baby's not self-aware. So that's where I'm drawing my line. Once the baby has self-awareness. Wait, if Chad Robichaux knocks the crap out of you in a fight because he's such a stud, you're not self-aware. Can I slit your throat? Did you lose your personhood and then regain it when you came to? What about grandma, grandpa? They're on life support. Some of this is personal for some people. So they're on life support. Maybe they're in a coma. They're still a person, but they're not self-aware right now. Can we kill them? Did they lose their personhood? They woke up from a coma. Oh, they got their personhood back. This doesn't sound like science. It sounds like weird occult agnosticism, weird pagan religions. Yeah. Exactly. That's how we have to view this stuff. So if you don't draw the protection of human life at the moment of conception when a human being begins, we are handing power over to the state to decide which humans qualify for the status of personhood. And that's how we need to frame this. And for the next epic hour with Chad Robichaux, baby, we have to realize we're not just saying like, oh, it's another social issue. Hey, you're pro-choice, I'm pro-life. Hey, let's agree to disagree. No, like that's why our founders created an order of rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because if you don't have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness don't mean much. In fact, they mean nothing at all if you can be slaughtered in the name of radical feminism. I also understand the religion of abortion and transgenderism because I too was a man trapped in a woman's body and then I was born. And so, I've been a pro-life activist since I was a fetus. My mother led a pregnancy center, saving babies and loving on moms while pregnant with me. So if it's her body, her choice, because there is no baby, because it's healthcare, because it's just her body, that's why they don't say our body's my choice, because you can't acknowledge that there's a separate human being. So they say my body, my choice. Then I guess every part of me was part of my mother's, but wait, there is no me because I was just a blob of tissue because it's just her body. So every baby my mother saved while directing a pregnancy resource center while pregnant with me, I saved. So I have been a pro-life activist since I was a fetus. Welcome to Resilient.
Welcome to Resilient. The journey of, starting in the womb, in a pregnancy center, till today, you're a fighter. You're a highly intelligent person. You're capable of probably doing anything you want to do. What made you decide this was the fight? What led you to choose this as your fight?
Well, abortion is wrong because I was once a fetus. So abortion's not a woman's issue, it's a human issue. And I'm very grateful my mother didn't pay to have me dissected and dismembered in the name of feminism. So firstly, I care about this issue because guess what? I'm glad I wasn't aborted.
Yeah.
Young men listening to me right now, next time they tell you, shut up, you have the wrong genitals. I want you, young man, to say, I'm grateful I wasn't aborted and I was male from the moment of conception. And so therefore, I'm very grateful that my right to life as a little boy was protected and my mother didn't kill me. So we have to stop talking about this as a woman's issue, first and foremost.
Yeah.
We have to talk about this as a human issue. I came from a uterus, so did you, Chad. And I'm super grateful you're here now, okay? We all came from uteruses, okay? Although that's beginning to change, and that's also a podcast for another time. But anyways, and then the second answer to your question is that I was just raised in these waters, like I did the Walk for Life every year, which is like sometimes this fundraiser people do with these wonderful pregnancy resource centers. And people sponsor you to walk, and then you do this walk, and you hold pro-life signs, and you raise money for these centers. And my mom was directing one of those centers in the late 80s, early 90s in Los Angeles County. When there were like 80% less pregnancy centers in the 80s than there are today in 2024 around America. And by the way, the left hates these pregnancy centers, right?
Sure.
When Roe versus Wade got overturned, the next day, Elizabeth Warren, she came out and she said, we need to shut down every pregnancy resource center in America because you shouldn't be able to torture pregnant people like that. That's what she said. Of course, pregnant people used to be called women. But, I guess now men can give birth through their urethra. I'm not sure how that works, but, we have to call them pregnant people now, not women.
I think that'd be more painful for men.
That would be pretty painful. Yeah. I've been trying to think about what a trans woman giving birth means. I'm not sure how this all works or whatever. But so these pregnancy centers do incredible work. They're largely underfunded and understaffed. And they save babies and they love on moms and they help them be parents and they give them material and financial support and relational support. That's what I grew up in, Chad. And so Los Angeles County, homeschool boy through 8th grade. And then I went to Whittier High School. And my senior year, I did my senior project on abortion because as a pro-life Christian homeschool kid, I actually felt like I didn't have a ton of good answers to my pro-choice friends. Now, remember, Chad, I'm 33. So I graduated high school in 2010. I was kind of that last generation that had maybe a veneer of normalcy in my high school experience. All my friends were sleeping around and having sex, but you could be friends with a Democrat. You could have a pro-choice friend and you could be pro-life and they still liked you. That went away really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And so I had pro-choice friends and they didn't hate me and they respected my position. But I felt like I didn't have a lot of good answers to my friends. And so I picked abortion as my senior project. And I had to write a research paper, I had to do volunteer hours, and then I had to give a speech in front of a panel of teachers at the end of the year. And so I volunteered at this pro-life ministry in Orange County. And dude, I'm 18 years old. It's December of 2009. And here's what they tasked me with. And this is what changed my life. And this is really the answer to your question. How did I take this on? I had to scan about 400 images of first trimester mutilated, dissected, and dismembered aborted baby photos on a high quality scanner and categorize them in the database for this nonprofit to use for their educational projects. And by the way, I fully support the display of abortion imagery in the public square. If you're pro-choice, you should be willing to look at what that choice looks like. So what I started doing, bro, is I started hosting genocide awareness projects with this nonprofit at UC Berkeley, Cal State Fullerton, San Diego State University, all these big campuses. And we would set up these 15-foot wide, 8-foot tall pictures that compared abortion with aborted baby photos to the Holocaust, to Pol Pot, to Cambodian genocides that all said that their victim classes weren't really people. They weren't persons. And so I would set these up on college campuses. And dude, sometimes pro-choice students would come out with like papers or sheets and try to cover up and hide the pictures. And I'm like, but that's healthcare.
Yeah.
You're just showing women's healthcare. Does it look great? No, it doesn't look great. There's eyeballs and noses and blood and like little feet and hands of little first trimester babies. And first trimester, Chad. When do 90% of abortions occur in America? First trimester.
Yeah, first 15 weeks.
Yeah. When's the greatest public support for abortion, according to polling? First trimester, weeks, yeah. Including Trump, unfortunately. And so here I am scanning photos of mutilated, aborted baby photos, and it changed my life. I had never seen those images before. And so think about this. I'm a pro-life Christian homeschool kid from Los Angeles with a mom who ran a pregnancy center, and I hadn't seen those images. How many people in the broader public who know nothing about the pro-life fight do you think have seen those kind of images?
Yeah.
Zilch, none, nada. So that was really the turning point in my life, and that's a little bit of my background to how I started entering this battle.
So today you're the CEO, you're founder and CEO of the White Rose Resistance.
Yeah.
What is the organization? Why the name White Rose Resistance? I think the story is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. It was an anti-Nazi Christian resistance movement in 1942 and 1943 in Munich, Germany. However, that story will mean a lot more to your listeners if we first discuss all of the ties between the Nazism,
we can come back to it at the end.
Third Reich, Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Joseph Goebbels, Alfred Rosenberg, Fritz Sauckel, and Robert Ley, to the American eugenics movement in America, to Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, to her pals, financiers, board members, and guest writers for her magazine. Once you understand the links between the culture of death, not just in America, but in the West writ large, the stories of young people standing against Hitler's ideas in 1942 are a hell of a lot more inspirational when you understand that we Christians in America weren't standing against those same ideas coming from American leftists who get themselves their faces at the Smithsonian on a bust, or their names on Planned Parenthood clinics, or their awards given to people named Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton. Yeah. And this stuff is so shocking, bro, you've seen the film, you know. This stuff is so shocking that I think if this film, The 1916 Project, came out in 2015, I don't think there would have been a market for it. I think I would have been called an Alex Jones tin hat wearing conspiracy theorist weirdo. But now post 2020, post 2020, when so many people are like, I think I'm being lied to about basically everything from every 3-letter agency in America. Yeah. Now, like, people are going, wait a second. Yeah. You know, Joe Rogan's challenging narratives that we never thought he would be challenging. And there's this new curiosity for maybe like deeper truths behind institutional power. I don't think there would have been a market for my film before 2020. And now it's like, oh, no. I'm a weird intellectual ADHD homeschool kid who knows how to go down the rabbit hole and do my research. I'll show you every receipt and citation to back up everything I'm going to say on the Chad Robichaux Show. So I will tell the story of the White Rose Resistance and young people standing against that regime. Once you understand who they were standing against were so influenced by American leftists, those stories mean a lot more, and they're far more inspirational for us today.
I'll ask you at the end. I'll bring it back. You referenced the culture of death. You've said it several times today. So, what is the culture of death?
What is the culture of death? I don't know. Let's see. Pol Pot, Margaret Sanger, Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, and Joseph Stalin would shed more innocent blood between the year 1900 and the year 2000 than all the murderers, warlords, criminals, and tyrants of previous history before the year 1900 combined. That's the culture of death. That's the simplest definition I can give.
My body, my choice. I think this is an attempt to silence anyone besides that woman who's making that decision. And I think that silencing comes from the pit of hell. I think this is a satanic and spiritual attempt to silence people to speak against this evil.
All human conflict is ultimately theological, which is a strange phrase in our post-Christian society.
But it doesn't matter if you believe in God or not.
You're a religious being.
Yeah.
You're an eternal being, and you can't help but function religiously.
Right.
Let's build that out, Chad. Okay, I have some interesting thoughts on that. Let me give some examples. Darwinian, materialists, secularists, atheists, there's no gods. It's interesting how some of their leaders, they can't help but use religious language to even describe their own anti-God, anti-Christian secularist worldviews. Here's one example. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who my contention is in my film and book that she's the most successful revolutionary leftist of the 20th century, whose actions and revolution have more of a fingerprint on the 21st century insanity than any other revolutionary that spawned out of the 20th century. That's my contention.
Yeah.
And I think I can prove that in my book and film. She said things like this: through sex, mankind may attain a great spiritual illumination, which will transform the world and light up the only path to an earthly paradise, end quote. And you're like, you're a secular materialist atheist. What do you mean through sex, mankind may attain spiritual illuminations and find an earthly paradise? Herbert Maruza, who's one of the fathers of the free love movement. If it feels good, do it. Woodstock, woo, hippies, right?
Yeah.
So Herbert Maruza, by the way, mentored Angela Davis, who mentored Nicole Hannah-Jones, who authored the 1619 Project. And she also mentored Patrisse Cullors and Alicia Garza, the co-founders of BLM. So anyways, but Herbert Maruza, a sexual revolutionary materialist leftist, said, the way back into the garden, meaning Eden, he said the way back into the garden is to take another bite of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He's like referring to the original sin, to Genesis, like, don't eat that fruit. You can eat anything else in the garden, but like, listen to me, obey your father, obey your creator, don't touch it. And he goes, yeah, so the way back into Eden, the way back into eternity, into that perpetual state of innocence, commit the original sin again. And you're like, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the Bible, you don't believe in spiritual realities. I could go on and on and on and on and on. These people can't help but use religious language to describe their own worldview. Now, to narrow it down even more to abortion, what we're talking about, Chad.
To my body, my choice, right?
Well, that's interesting, because those are the words of our Savior at the Last Supper. Mm-hmm. Of all the arrangements of words, Chad, that the culture could arrange to defend abortion, the rallying cry for decades. I mean, if you guys are like over 40 and you're listening to this, or you're over 50, you remember like they were saying this in the 70s. This is not a new phrase. So abortion says, this is my body. I break you, baby, for me. But Christ says, this is my body and I break it for you. So abortion says, you must die so I can live. But Christ says, no, I must die so you can live. In each case, there's the shedding of innocent blood. Christ willingly sheds his innocent blood as the God-man, the perfect human, without sin, takes the punishment we deserve so we can be forgiven and given eternal life. The double imputation, his righteousness given to us, our sin removed, our record removed. So abortion says, well, yeah, we do need to shed innocent blood, but we're just going to shed the blood of babies.
This isn't new. This has been historically.
That's right.
The shedding of innocent blood as the unborn infants.
Yep, as a way
as a way to sacrifice,
as a way to pursue human flourishing, as a way to make things right with the gods, quote unquote.
So Satan has been long sacrificing the blood.
Oh yeah,
of
that's
babies.
right. I think Peter Craf, he's a Catholic philosopher. He's very brilliant. He's still alive today. I think he put it more prophetically than anyone I've ever heard, Chad. Here's what he said. He said, abortion is the demonic parody of the Eucharist. That's why it uses the same holy words. This is my body, but with the opposite blasphemous meaning. It goes one layer deeper, if you want to go there spiritually.
Go for it.
Chad, what's the next thing Jesus says after he says, this is my body, I break it for you? Take and eat in remembrance of me. I've only said this on a couple shows, Chad, but the number one joke and attack I get from pro-abortion activists on my social media accounts, in the comment section, and in direct messages for years. And by the way, ask this of any pro-life leader who leads a big pro-life organization. They'll tell you they get these in their direct messages and on all their social media accounts as well. is jokes about eating fetuses.
Cultish behavior.
Dude, I'm
right?
33. I've been getting these since my mid-20s.
These aren't political positions. Cultish behavior.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about abortion activists, crazy weirdos on social media, and they message me and they comment and they say, yummy, just ate a fetus. Just got done with my fetus breakfast. Can't wait to eat my next abortion. So yummy. Having some fetuses for dessert later. I get these I've been getting these in my social media for years, bro. What do you do with that? Do you have another category for that except demonic? I don't.
No.
We have to understand, if you're a Christian, how demonic what we're dealing with is. Abortion is Satan's pride and joy. Satan would kill God if he could, but he can't. So he kills babies because he knows it wounds the heart of the Father and causes chaos on the earth. That's his MO. That's his standard operating procedure. That's his job description. Seek, kill, destroy. And if you know anything about the scriptures, you'll know Jesus and his Father in both Old and New Testament, kind of a big thing about protecting the innocent,
yes,
the vulnerable, and what's that word? Children. For if you cause even a little one of these to stumble, says Jesus, it would have been better for you to have a millstone thrown around your neck and drown in the bottom of the ocean. If that's how Jesus feels about causing a little one to stumble, Chad, how do you think he feels about ripping their arms off of their bodies and selling them to the highest bidder on the black market? And Kamala Harris, as Attorney General in California, will send her state troopers to raid the apartments of the pro-life undercover journalists who recorded Planned Parenthood in small, sneaky cameras, admitting that they sell the bodies and organs of aborted babies, and they adjust the ways they perform abortions to get the cadavers of the babies as intact as possible, because you can make more money selling the cranium and the head when the organs and the pieces of the dead baby are more intact. Oops, her biggest campaign donor, Planned Parenthood, as she was Attorney General in California, was caught on camera, multiple high-ranking corporate officials for breaking federal law and trafficking in fetal organs from murdered babies, selling them to third-party labs so they could perform Joseph Mengele-like experiments in California. Oh, and by the way, and in Houston, Texas too. So Kamala Harris sends her state agents to break into the apartment of private citizens and undercover journalists and take their footage. That's how demonic what we're dealing with actually is. That only scratches the surface of actually the demonic and dark side. I guess you could call it the dark underbelly of the abortion industry.
You and I are both abolitionists, meaning that there's no place for any abortion anywhere.
That's right.
Where I stand. And the reason we are is because you and I both align with the fact that life begins at conception. In the Bible, in Jeremiah 1:5, it says this: "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." So the Bible is very clear, I believe, on the point of where life begins, and that's in the womb. You've made mention before about the interaction between Jesus and John in the womb, and I just think that emphasizes so much of where the biblical truth is on this.
Chad, it's even cooler than that. So I know you have a big Christian audience, and we love Jesus. You know, Jesus was the greatest former fetus to have ever existed.
Yeah.
Jesus enters human history in a uterus to redeem mankind from their sins. Oh, by the way, this also means that to be a pro-choice Christian is to commit a Christological heresy, because to be a pro-choice Christian would mean that Christ was at some point fully God but not fully human, in violation of the doctrine of the incarnation. To be a pro-choice Christian is to say that Mary had a right to murder your Savior. Y'all okay? Did you keep up with that one? Do that on half speed. To be a pro-choice Christian is to celebrate Mary's right to murder your Savior in the name of healthcare. If women have a right to abortion, then all women have a right to abortion, right? If all women have a right to abortion, then so did Mother Mary, which means every child that Mother Mary was pregnant with was not a person and could have been killed, and that would have been Mary exercising her feminism healthcare rights. If Mary could have killed your Savior in the womb, it means that he wasn't fully human and didn't really have the right to life. But wait a second, the Bible teaches that the Word became flesh and made its dwelling amongst us. That the incarnation means that Jesus didn't magically become fully God and fully human when he slipped out of the birth canal. It means that Jesus was fully God and fully human from the moment of conception. And so when Mary goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, the prenatal John the Baptist, by the way, John the Baptist, Jesus would later say, of those born amongst women, there has never been one greater than John the Baptist. So just, Christian, really quickly, Jesus said John the Baptist was the greatest human being to have ever lived. Well, when John the Baptist is in the uterus, Mary and Elizabeth are sipping back on tea, having a little fellowship time, celebrating what God's doing in their uteruses. The prenatal John the Baptist, little voice in the wilderness, who would prepare the way for the Savior, starts doing backflips in the uterus because he recognizes the humanity and divinity of his prenatal deity, second member of the Trinity, God-man, who once breathed out the freaking Milky Way and is now in Mary's uterus, which would be his aunt's uterus. But because Jesus is fully God and fully human, not from the moment of birth, he's fully God and fully human from the moment of conception. Then Psalm 139 says that God knit you together in your mother's womb. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Your frame was not hidden from me when you were woven together in the dark of the earth. My eyes saw your unformed substance before any of them came to be. But wait a second, Jesus is the second member of the Trinity. So Jesus actually is God. Well, was he God at the moment of birth? No, wait, the incarnation teaches he was God at the moment of conception. So that is God in the womb. So if God and his life together in the womb, and that is God in the womb, then that means in this little hangout between Mary and Elizabeth as they're sipping back on tea and celebrating what God's doing in their uteruses, the prenatal John the Baptist is doing backflips in the womb, recognizing his creator, who's a fetus. And fetus is a Latin word for offspring or small child. So the next time someone tells you it's not a baby, it's a fetus, you can say, good use of technical language. You're right. It is an offspring and it is a small child. That's what fetus means. And so you got the second member of the Trinity, prenatal deity, God-man, who's knitting the prenatal John the Baptist together in the womb while he himself is in a womb, because that is God in the womb. And if God and his life together in the womb, then you've got fetus God knitting fetus John the Baptist together in the womb. But because Jesus is fully God and fully human from the moment of conception and God and his life together in the womb, then you've got the prenatal Jesus knitting himself together while he knits the prenatal John the Baptist together, while he knits himself together in the womb of a woman whose uterus he once knit together when he knit together Mary in the womb of Mary's mother. That's what's happening in that scene right there.
Yeah.
That's called the incarnation, Chad. It also goes by another name, Christianity.
Yeah.
Christianity. If you're a Christian, that's the arrival of the long prophesied and awaited God-man, right? That every generation of Israelites was hoping to see in their day. He's here. It's the Savior we've been waiting for. But he doesn't enter human history as a 30-year-old man. Oh, no. He enters human history as a fetus, baby. He takes on fetal flesh. He identifies with us from our most vulnerable stage, the prenatal stage. You don't mess with what's in the womb because your Savior entered human history in a womb to redeem you from your sins and buy you back from the kingdom of darkness and transfer you into the kingdom of light. Oh, and by the way, Roe versus Wade, which got overturned on June 24th, 2022, in the church calendar, every June 24th, Chad, is the nativity of St. John the Baptist. Do you know that Christians have festivals and feasts? We don't really celebrate them anymore. We know more about LGBTQ, LMNOPIA, My Name is Legion month every June, and the various liturgical feasts of the religion of humanism than we do about our own festivals and feasts of our Christian faith. But there are feasts and festivals and religious holidays in the Christian tradition. We just don't celebrate them anymore. Well, one of those is the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. It's when Christians celebrate Mary going to visit her cousin Elizabeth. And when she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, God and John start doing backflips in the uterus. It's when we remember that scene. Roe versus Wade got overturned on June 24, 2022. Roe got overturned on the day in the church calendar when Christians celebrate two unborn babies, one of whom is God. And then in Luke 1, when it says that Mary laid baby Jesus in the manger, right, the Greek word for baby is barephos. So Mary laid barephos Jesus in the manger. Fast forward to Luke 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Luke 1, when John leaps in the womb, right, it says barephos leaped in the womb. You go forward to Luke 2 and it says Mary laid baby Jesus in the manger. It's the same Greek word, barephos. So the same word is used to refer to unborn babies as is used to refer to born babies, because God sees no distinction between the value and dignity of life in the womb and the value and dignity of life outside the womb. So that's some of the amazing, beautiful biblical theological clarity behind this issue. If your Savior became a fetus to save you from your sins, we don't have the right to kill any babies.
So the tragic scenario of rape, incest, one of the biggest arguments of the left is, what about rape? What about incest? What about the health of the mother?
Always,
and my argument against that has been, well, that counts for less than probably 1%. You probably know the exact numbers.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%. So if I give you that, can we agree the other 99%
and they always say
is
no.
murder? And of
to
course
which I say,
no.
then why are you hiding behind rape victims to make yourself look more compassionate?
Right.
I have more compassion, and so do you, Chad, for the victim of sexual assault and the victim of rape. Do you want to know why? Because you and I support forcibly castrating the guy's testicles or hanging him in the public square the next morning.
Absolutely.
You and I would support legislation to cut off the family jewels of the rapist within hours of the reported rape, or I'm willing to actually entertain the death penalty for rapists. Pro-life means I oppose intentionally killing innocent human beings. When you rape innocent women, you have forfeited your right to life. I'm still thinking through that. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say death penalty. I think I am, but I certainly support forcible castrations for rapists. Now, here's an interesting question, Chad. Do secular progressive leftists who support abortion, are they super good on like harsh penalties for criminals, or do they generally support legislation that spring criminals from the clink and get them back onto the streets?
Typically not.
Right, exactly. Leftists who are pro-abortion by and large, they do not support life prison sentences. They would definitely not support castrations for rapists. And they're very lenient on all this stuff. Part of compassion is justice.
Justice is, yeah.
What we
Justice,
support
compassion.
would send a very loud message to every would-be rapist in America that if you touch that woman, you're probably not going to have any balls in the next 24 hours. Pro-choice leftists don't support that kind of legislation. So you and I have more compassion for the victim of sexual assault because we want to see justice for what was done to her. However, if you get pregnant from rape, abortion does not unrape a woman. It just commits another act of violence against an innocent human being. Listen to this. Abortion and rape are wrong for the same reasons. Why is abortion wrong? It intentionally harms an innocent human being without proper justification. Why is rape wrong? It intentionally harms an innocent human being without proper justification. I want to punish the guilty party and protect the innocent. Our value does not come from the circumstances of our conception. Let's say I have two ultrasound photos of babies at 10 weeks old. One baby was conceived in rape. One baby was conceived by two loving married parents who were having their first kid. Which one was conceived in rape? It's a simple little lesson. Of course, You can't answer the question because it's a human being regardless. Also, pro-choicer, why don't you go meet some of the pro-life speakers I know who were conceived in rape but weren't killed, and they go around speaking, saying, your policies and ideas would have killed me. Here I am. Why should I be dead simply so you can get rid of a problem? Let's punish the rapist and protect the child. We can acknowledge the psychological complexity of a pregnancy from rape, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I can't imagine. Horrific. But killing the baby is not a solution. It just commits another act of violence. And actually, some of the polling and stats have really borne out and shown, Chad, that women who are raped and then get abortions struggle with more trauma and depression. Why? Because deep down you killed an innocent human being and that wasn't the solution. You can give the baby up for adoption. You can choose to raise the child, but it's not chill to murder children for the crimes of their father.
Let's take you and I's strong abolition opinion out of this and let them have that one. What numbers are we really talking about in percentage of overall? I said less than 1% for those three categories. I don't know if I'm correct or not.
I have to say
for rape and incest.
Abortion's never medically necessary to save mom's life.
Okay, so that one's off the table.
We'll get into that because people, I get fact checked every time I say that on social media. I said that on stage with Charlie Kirk at a big event, right? And I got a whole Reuters. I forgot who wrote up the fact check, but I had a whole warning. Seth's wrong. Click here to learn why he's a liar. On Instagram, and you read this whole thing about how I got fact checked. A whole article written about it. So the left has been saying for a long time that abortion is sometimes medically necessary to save mom's life. So let's table that one and let's return to it in like 90 seconds because it's really important actually. Rape and incest, abortions from rape and incest account for less than 1% or about 1% of the annual abortion rate. Now, someone says, well, Seth, not all pregnancies from rape are reported. That's probably true.
Sure.
So maybe it's a little higher. But in terms of reported percentages, it's 1% or less than 1%. And so if you're pro-life, you should always ask your pro-choice friends exactly what Chad said. If I give you killing babies and rape, will you join me to fight to end the 99% of all other abortions that don't occur in cases of rape? And then they always say no. So you should tell them, why are you hiding behind rape victims to make yourself look more compassionate? If you support abortion, then you support abortion. If you support abortion, it doesn't matter the circumstances that led to the pregnancy. Just say you support killing all babies or no babies. And if you can kill a baby conceived in rape, why not other children? Because their dignity and humanity is no different.
It's no different
than the child conceived by two loving parents. So just admit that you want abortions for any reason or no reason at all, and stop hiding behind victims of sexual assault to try to make your pro-choice position look more compassionate.
Let's go back to the medical for the health of the mother. This is, always brought up as an issue. From everything I've read and understand, and from what you're saying right now, there are no circumstances where abortion is necessary for the health of the mother.
The only way the left has been able to argue and convince the public, Chad, that abortion is sometimes necessary to save mom's life is by spouting the lie that abortion is safer than childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense? Think about it for a second. They're saying there are some circumstances in which we have to kill the baby through abortion to save mom's life. But then if you have two brain cells left to rub together and you didn't major in lesbian dance theory at UC Berkeley, you should be asking yourself, are there other ways to end pregnancy? Childbirth.
That's a good one.
Oh, I found it. Homeschooled. Oh, yeah, deliver baby. Oh, then she wouldn't be pregnant. So, okay, so childbirth is a way to end pregnancy. So, okay, so Kamala Harris, who has been lying on national television and having the moderators carry water for her during the presidential debate because y'all are journalistic prostitutes for the culture of death and not journalists concerned with the truth. You know how you lied to the American people with the Trump-Harris debate and you said, sometimes we have to perform an abortion to save mom's life and this is very dangerous and pro-life laws are killing women. And so if pro-choicers were in charge, women would be living. And so you're saying basically that abortion is safer than childbirth because otherwise you would just be saying in these dangerous life circumstances to induce early labor with Pitocin or perform a cesarean section because that would also end the pregnancy. And if these rare cases of pregnancy risk to mom's life is what would kill her, then why can't we end pregnancy with childbirth instead of abortions? The only way they're able to manufacture and arrange that argument in the way that they do in the first place, Chad, is by assuming that childbirth is more dangerous for mothers than abortion. Did you follow that?
I did, yeah.
There is a claim you'll hear on the left and on social media, and it's based off of a fraudulent study that I can debunk. But it says, we just learned that pregnancy and delivery is 10 times more dangerous for mothers than abortion. And they've been spouting this line, this percentage, bro, for decades. So what does that do to the conscience and mindset of American women if they believe that?
They believe it's safer.
You should get an abortion every time you're pregnant.
Right.
No, think about that for a second.
Yeah, it's safer.
Actually, you know what? I have a screenshot from a Planned Parenthood Twitter account. You know, they have like Planned Parenthood of Greater New York, Planned Parenthood of the Midwest, these different chapters. And it's a Planned Parenthood Twitter account. And it said, scary stats in all caps. If you're a Black woman, it is statistically safer to get an abortion than to give birth. But by the way, once we get into Margaret Sanger's Negro Project, that's what she called it. She launched it in 1939. It was an initiative of Planned Parenthood. Once we get into the Negro Project that I expose in my film and book, the 1916 Project, then this makes a lot more sense because she put most of her clinics in Black neighborhoods. But anyways, scary stats. It's always more dangerous for Black mothers to give birth than to have an abortion. So if you say that for decades, what is a young woman who gets pregnant thinking? If I care about my health and my future maternal health, every time I get pregnant, I should get an abortion because it would be more dangerous for me to deliver the child. Dude, it's all bull crap. It's all horse manure, dude. The study that's claimed that, there's no way that they could possibly stand on a statistical foundation of credibility to claim that in the first place, because maternal deaths, and which would be deaths from childbirth, and deaths from abortion are completely and fundamentally different. But they're often meshed together and treated as the same by the abortion industry. Also, when women have complications from an abortion, health complications, which also is wrapped up into the alleged safety of abortion for mothers. Most women who have complications from an abortion in the days or weeks following an abortion, they don't go back to the abortionist to report those complications. But the FDA requires that abortion providers report all complications from abortions. So they're the only institution mandated to report complications that would provide a statistical foundation for us to compare the safety of abortion to the safety of childbirth just for mothers, obviously. By the way, abortion is never safe because killing people isn't safe. So the baby always ends up dead. So even just saying abortion is safe is like a weird thing, right? It's like, can we have a conversation about the safety of like wife beating and spousal abuse? And you're like, well, it's not safe for the wife. So, of course, what they mean by abortion safety is the mothers. But anyways, so they don't even have the stats to be able to. Most women who have complications from abortion, Chad, they report it to their primary care physician. within days or weeks following an abortion who's not mandated to report it to the FDA or to these institutions that would capture that data in the first place. So I could go deeper on that, but like the background that, I know this is like more than you wanted, but I'm like the pro-life Rain Man, okay, and this should go viral and wake up Americans to vote accordingly, is the background assumptions that allow them to claim that sometimes abortion is medically necessary to save mom's life is this other claim that childbirth is more dangerous for mothers than abortions. Meaning it is safer to shove a vacuum catheter tube or forceps up your vaginal canal and pierce the amniotic sac and start ripping limbs off of the baby. That's safer for your future maternal health mother than just inducing early labor with Pitocin.
Yeah.
Or performing a C-section, okay? And so there's more on all that stuff. I just did an episode with Alex Clark at TPUSA, her show Cultural Apothecary, about how abortion leads to mental health issues, preterm delivery for future pregnancies for babies that mother doesn't kill, and breast cancer. So if you really want to get red-pilled on all the real facts on the danger of abortion for mothers, go to Alex Clark's show, Culture Apothecary. I can share those stats with you. I know them better than probably almost anyone else my age, but dude, they've been lying to women for decades. So now that we've debunked that lie, when they say sometimes there's a dangerous pregnancy that'll take mom's life, okay, then let's just deliver the baby. That's safer for mom. It's safer for mom to just use Pitocin and deliver the baby. Now the pregnancy's ended, and now there's no pregnancy risk to her life. So if the left is really all about healthcare, women's healthcare, we're here to serve women, then tell them the truth. Stop lying to them. But notice, those who murder the unborn and profit off of it are just as happy to harm the healthcare of the women they say they exist to serve so they can turn a quick buck.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if a mom, and by the way, these circumstances are so rare, Chad. They're so rare. Meaning like a pregnancy that if it continues, mom will die.
Yeah.
We can usually now put her on bed rest, get the baby developmentally advanced enough that they could be delivered and still survive and not have like major prematurely delivered risks like, cerebral palsy or chronic long-term disabilities that sometimes are associated with very early preemies. But in the rare circumstance where we have to end the pregnancy to save mom's life, you deliver the baby, you don't rip it apart. Now, someone might say, well, Seth, but if the baby's so young, once again, we're talking about like less than 1%. We're talking about super rare cases, but they do happen sometimes. Like ectopic pregnancy, where the baby implants in the fallopian tube. The left has been funding these lies in states that are moving to ban abortion after the overturning of Roe. And I don't know if you remember some of these lies, but they were so influential that I had pro-life friends of mine texting me saying, Seth, is it true that if a mom has an ectopic pregnancy, that the baby's in the fallopian tube and not the uterus? So are you telling me, Seth, that pro-lifers want women with tubal pregnancies to bleed out and hemorrhage because her fallopian tube burst? And like they were saying these lies, like as if like banning abortion means you can't remove the baby from the fallopian tube in a tubal pregnancy. That's not true. But that's why we have different surgical names. So it's called a salpingectomy or a salpingostomy. But you either remove the fallopian tube or hopefully you create a small incision in the fallopian tube and you remove the fetus, the embryo, because you can't save the life of both mother and child in an ectopic pregnancy. You can't. So notice, what's the intent in a salpingectomy or a salpingostomy? It's to save mom's life. Right. What's the intent in
There's no legislation against that.
In every abortion, it's to kill the baby. There's no legislation against that. And then the other lie was this one. And Kamala Harris and The Atlantic and the New York Times in the last 5 weeks have been spouting these lies. They've been saying, and they were spouting it in 2022, right after the overturning of Roe. By the way, do you want to know the depths of the evil and the liars we're dealing with? Because I'm the weird pro-life intellectual ADHD homeschool kid, I found a screenshot from Planned Parenthood before Roe v. Wade was overturned. And then there was a sentence on their website that was no longer on their website after Roe v. Wade got overturned. But thanks to the Wayback Machine, I was able to find it. Before Roe v. Wade got overturned, Chad, on Planned Parenthood's website, guess what it said? Treatment for ectopic pregnancy is fundamentally different than treatment for abortion. So what are they admitting? Removing the baby from the fallopian tube, that's a fundamentally different thing and procedure than in an abortion. They're acknowledging that you can do that even in a state where abortion's banned. But then Roe got overturned and the New York Times began to argue that pro-life laws would kill women with tubal pregnancies. So Planned Parenthood removed the line from their website that admitted that pro-lifers were right, that those were fundamentally different, to help give credence to the lie that was being spread in the culture. And then the last one is miscarriages. So the left has been saying since the overturning of Roe that if your baby is miscarried and it sadly passes away in utero, that you won't be able to remove the baby with a DNC, which is a dilation and curettage. It's a type of abortion. But they also call it a DNC when you remove a baby who's already passed away. And so leftists who want to try to blame pro-lifers for killing women, they're saying that pro-life laws will prevent the surgical procedure to remove a baby from the uterus who's already passed away.
Not true.
So that story from 6 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago or something like that, that woman in Georgia with the last name Thurman, the story took off. Everyone was sharing this. Kamala Harris.
That's what they were saying.
Dobbs killed her. Dobbs is the name of the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. So they're saying pro-life laws are killing women because her baby was incompletely aborted, meaning there were still pieces of the child in her uterus. And they're saying she wasn't able to get a DNC, and that's the fault of pro-lifers because now doctors aren't allowed to perform DNCs on babies that have already passed away. It's a total lie. It's never been true. And so those are the lies behind the you can't remove the baby and you can't do anything in a life-threatening circumstance. No, you can deliver the baby to save mom's life. If the baby's already passed away, you can remove it. There's no pro-life laws that prevent that. And if you actually cared about the health of women, you would always support delivery over abortions. But they don't care about the lives of women because, like the preborn child, the mothers are a very convenient victim class to continue their industry that is built on exploitation, lies, and murder.
I have one more question I want to get into abortion before we get into history of Planned Parenthood, is when it comes to voting, unfortunately, and it saddens me. By the way, I'm a surrogate on President Trump's campaign for veterans policy, so I'm pro-Trump. I'm going to be voting for President Trump. However, on this issue, we do not have a pro-life candidate in this election. President Trump and Vice President candidate Vance, who I believe are both self-proclaimed to be Christians, evangelical Christians. They both agreed to a 15-week, they call it a 15-week ban, but essentially allowing abortions up to 15 weeks.
It's over 90% of the abortions.
Yeah, I think that 95% of abortions are in the first 15 weeks, right? So
this is why today's Republicans look like Democrats 20 years ago.
Yes. So I do not agree with my candidate of choice's position on this. However, the other side of the more evil side is full term, and this has come up in both debates, the presidential debate and the vice presidential debate on full-term abortion.
Which does happen, by the way.
Which does happen.
The moderators stepped in and lied about late-term abortions and about infanticide. But Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, who's Kamala Harris's VP running mate, he passed legislation in Minnesota. I have all the proof. I talked about this on the Seth Gruber Show on my podcast, Judd. He signed legislation that removed the reporting requirement for doctors to report to the authorities if a baby was born alive during a botched abortion. So this is getting really down in the weeds and technical, so let me say that slower again for everyone listening. You have to report to the authorities if a baby is born alive and is now outside of the uterus, but they were born alive in the process of the attempted abortion on their life in their mother's uterus. Chad?
Once they're out and the baby's still alive and fighting for its life, because a human at any stage will be fighting for its life, or they required by law to save the life or complete killing.
Right. And so there is no federal legislation that provides penalties and prosecution for abortionists who refuse to care for or actively kill a baby after it's born alive. And by the way, I know this will be super shocking, but people who murder babies, they don't have a problem with lying.
Obviously, yeah.
I know, think about that for a second. So when you kill children, a lie doesn't really trouble your moral conscience. I know that's shocking. And it's very profitable to kill third trimester babies, right? You understand this, guys, if you're listening, abortions that pay the most are the largest, the more advanced, third trimester babies. So an abortionist who's making that much money, he can't deal with that problem of oops. By the way, when you pay for an abortion, what you're paying for is a dead kid. Because if an abortion is successful, there's a dead kid. So this abortionist has failed to deliver what he was paid for.
Right.
The baby's now on the steel cold table. And the whole abortion staff that's in the room, they obviously don't believe these children have any value whatsoever. They know there's no fetus fairy. They know that the child that's now on the table was the same child 6 inches away that they failed to kill in utero. Where one is has no bearing on who one is. but they don't care about that. So now, what are you going to do? Just get rid of it. No one's going to know. Why? Because we don't have to report it. There's no federal legislation. I'm not talking about state legislation. I'm talking about federal. There is no federal legislation that provides penalties and consequences. What we're talking about is legislation with teeth.
Right.
For those who do nothing or actively kill babies who survive abortions. However, in Minnesota, there was a law that required you to report to the authorities that, oh, it's this baby. I was supposed to kill it in the womb, but oops, it was born alive, and here's the infant. He removed the reporting requirement in Minnesota legislation so that abortionists and doctors, because in many of these states like Minnesota, some of these like Democrat blue run pro-abortion states allow non-doctors to perform abortions. There are some states that allow veterinarians to perform abortions, by the way, like in California, just so you understand. And so now you don't have to report this anymore. And we have the documentation showing that at least 7 infants, 7 babies who were born alive during a botched failed abortion procedure were left to die on a steel cold table by abortionists in Minnesota.
How long would that take?
Tim Waltz is responsible for that. Depends on how far along the child was. We know from the University of Pittsburgh, Fauci, ever heard of that guy?
Yeah.
And his boss, Francis Collins. Francis Collins was Fauci's boss.
Yeah.
Francis Collins was the director of the NIH. And so they funded the University of Pittsburgh to create a fetal organ tissue lab at the University of Pittsburgh in 2020. By the way, if you're like, Chad, this Seth guy is really weird. All the citations in the book, The 1916 Project, I prove everything. Everything I say that sounds crazy, I have the receipts for. So your taxpayer dollars through the NIH and Fauci and his boss were funding the University of Pittsburgh. We have evidence from the medical research and documentation at the time, Chad, that some of these babies were aborted up to 42 weeks. Do you understand what that means? That means 2 weeks past full term, like overcooking. Like, you know, there's some babies, they like the womb and they're not ready to be born. Some of these full term babies were aborted, and some of the nurses reported at the University of Pittsburgh that these babies were born alive and they could see their hearts still beating. Because some babies at the earlier stages, their skin is still translucent, like not third trimester, obviously.
Right.
In earlier development, as the baby's still developing, their skin is translucent. You can see through it. You can see the veins. You can see the heart. And these people are at the University of Pittsburgh are literally talking about seeing the hearts of beating babies as they slice them open after they were out of the uterus. Okay, like your taxpayer dollars funded some of these grisly Joseph Mengele-like experiments at the University of Pittsburgh. We know that babies do survive abortion sometimes. I have a friend named Melissa Oden who runs the Abortion Survivors Network. And so she survived a saline-infused abortion in the 70s. And now she finds babies who are now adults who survived abortions when they were in utero and gets them to heal and find their voice and speak out against this culture of death. Babies do survive abortions. There's no federal legislation with teeth that would prosecute and criminalize those who do nothing with or actively kill babies who survive botched abortions. Tim Waltz supports that. He actively allowed and led to the murder of multiple infants in his home state. And at that debate with Harris and Trump, the moderator steps up in the middle of the debate and goes, there's no state in America that allows an infant to be killed after birth. Now, it's a lie, but it also has a kernel of truth, like most leftists are good at. Mm-hmm. It is illegal to kill infants after birth. But there's no legislation that like criminalizes and prosecutes this stuff. You got Tim Waltz literally saying, I'm going to change the law so you don't have to report this. Here, isn't this a great gift to the abortionists? You don't have to report it anymore. So if you fail to kill the baby in utero and it slips out, it's okay. It's okay.
How many states allow full-term abortion?
I don't have those numbers right now because all the states are moving in different directions
very
right
quickly.
now.
It's changing very quickly.
Since the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
But under Roe, before June 24, 2022, under Roe versus Wade, abortion was legal through all 9 months of pregnancy in all 50 states. Now, people say that's not true because what they say is, well, no, if you go look at Roe versus Wade and its companion case, Doe versus Bolton in 1973, it says that abortions are not allowed in the 3rd trimester or after fetal viability. But guess what the laws actually said in 1973, Jed? It said, unless a failure to get a late-term abortion endangers the mother's life or health.
Right.
Life or health. You go read Doe versus Bolton. People forget. Everyone knows Roe v. Wade.
Health could be mental health.
Yeah, people forget Doe versus Bolton. It went along with Roe v. Wade. Guess how they defined health? To include emotional, financial, and familial health. So I'm poor, or I got in a fight with my husband and I'm really stressed out. I need a 3rd trimester abortion. It's like, you're not going to die if this pregnancy continues. And we've already debunked that one, by the way, right? And so guess who, under Roe, guess who got to determine if the woman's definition of health was an adequate one to meet the legal requirement to perform and receive a 3rd trimester abortion?
The abortionist.
The abortionist.
Yeah.
Ever heard the phrase conflict of interest?
I've seen the videos of women calling to test their theory and just calling Planned Parenthood and saying, hey, I'm 8.5 months pregnant and I want an abortion.
Like, let's do it.
Schedule it. Yeah, let's schedule it. So if you don't believe Seth or don't believe me, then get on the phone and call a Planned Parenthood clinic and see if you could pull it off.
Sick.
Yeah.
And Chad, by the way, like there was a literal piece of federal legislation proposed that would have given that teeth to federal legislation to criminalize and prosecute those that allowed a baby to die that was born alive during a failed abortion, or just like walk away and do nothing and let the kid die. It was called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act in 2019 and 2020, sponsored by Ben Sasse, a senator from Nebraska. And all it said was, if a baby survives a botched abortion and is born, the baby has to be transferred to a hospital and be given the same level of medical attention and care as any other baby would receive born under normal circumstances and at the same gestational age.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you don't care for kid, or you walk away and do nothing, you're going to be held criminally responsible with the full force of the law. Okay, that's it. Want to know how many Democrats in the Senate voted for that? Two Democrat senators voted in support of an anti-infanticide legislation. Want to know how many times Nancy Pelosi, I call her the grandmother of Planned Parenthood, and the abortion industry, how many times did Nancy Pelosi the Democrats veto an anti-infanticide bill that, if it had passed, wouldn't have even curtailed a mother's right to get an abortion? It just would do something about protecting the baby if it was born alive. They vetoed that over 90 times.
But then she quotes scripture at times, right? Don't she?
Well, so did my former governor when I lived in California.
So did Satan.
Gavin Newsom.
So did Satan, by the way.
By the way, remember Gavin Newsom is Nancy Pelosi's nephew. He was using California taxpayer dollars to rent out billboards in more pro-life states that said, love your neighbor as yourself. Come to California to get abortions. Back to the top of your show, they can't help but use religious, spiritual language for their paganism.
This topic creates like a really, we have an election coming up. But again, it's very fair to say that we don't have a pro-life candidate.
Right.
But one is sitting at 15 weeks. One is sitting at 40 weeks or 42 weeks.
Right.
So how does a Christian make a decision to vote? And can Christians justify saying, well, I'm not going to vote?
Absolutely not. This is pretty basic, man. Like, Jesus isn't coming on Air Force One.
Yeah.
He's not on the ballot. You're always voting for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
Every time.
You have to.
Now, listen, I'm unfortunately, I don't think there's enough pro-life leaders raising their voice and criticizing Trump publicly. I do. This is what self-government looks like, by the way. Self-government is like, we the people are the sovereign. Use your voice. Speak out. If you don't like what your candidate or elected representative is saying and representing, let them know. Speak up. Like, guys, I voted for Trump in 2016. I voted for him in 2020. I'm going to vote for him next month. Okay, speaking as a private citizen and not the CEO of a nonprofit. But like, this is not complex, guys. Okay? If the guy you like and is voted for is saying evil, stupid crap, then raise your voice. And guess what? They respond because politicians fear the mob. And by the mob, I don't mean like we're going to burn your house. I just mean like the people being pissed off, And there was a great example of this, by the way, I think, Chad, from September. I think it was just last month, actually. And Trump had come out and sort of indicated his support for the abortion amendment in Florida. Newsflash, really quick to frame it for people listening. Since Roe got overturned, states are making their own laws, and some states are trying to codify abortion through point of birth. And the abortion industry is pushing this to have it codified into state constitutions. So right now, there's a fight in Florida, Colorado, Idaho, and many other states. Missouri.
I was just talking to Joby Martin about this in Florida. He's a pastor there. He's incredible.
Yeah, Pastor Joby's incredible. And so what they're trying to do, the left is trying to codify abortion through point of birth in the state of Florida as a Florida constitutional right. Okay? It's evil and wicked. So that's what's happening right now around the country since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. We have to speak up against that. But Trump came out and seemingly indicated his support for the radical abortion amendment in Florida. He said 6 weeks is not enough time, meaning what? To kill a baby, you need more than 6 weeks. He says, not enough time. We need more time. He does like this, right? And so it's like, whoa, pro-lifers were like, are you saying that you're going to vote for the abortion amendment? Because he lives in Florida. It's like, what? The pro-life outrage, thankfully, in this one time was so much. 24 hours later, the next day, he goes, oh no, I'm voting against it. I'm voting against it. It's too radical. It was a great example of we, the people, raising our voice and getting our candidates back into line. But that needs to happen more often.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the that's the personal side of this, the citizenry side of this that I want to speak to, which is we can't be so quick to hand our vote over. We need to say, you got to work for it. You got to stand for the unborn. Trump, you helped overturn Roe v. Wade. You've celebrated taking credit for it. Trump has taken credit. He said, I overturned Roe. Everyone wanted this. I've overturned Roe.
Yeah.
But now he's kind of criticized states like Arizona, who had banned abortion. Some judge overturned it, but they had a state law from the 1860s or something that had banned abortion. So for a while there, earlier this year, Arizona had banned abortion. Trump came out at that time with Kari Lake and said, this goes too far. This is wrong. And it's very confusing messaging to voters, because you're saying, I overturned Roe, and that's a good thing, which means states can decide their own laws. But when a state decides its own law, you say that's too much. So we need to raise our voice, but also the threat of a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz presidency is more wicked than I could possibly put into words on the Resilient Show. Kamala Harris was rated the furthest left senator of any senator in America by a left-wing agency when she was still a senator in California. Dude, meaning Bernie Sanders is more conservative.
Yeah.
This woman is senator, dude, sent state agents to break into the apartment of private citizens who are undercover journalists because they had footage, not in someone's home, like breaking law, I snuck in your home and I bugged it. No. These were undercover journalists having expensive steak salads at a big restaurant in the public with high-ranking Planned Parenthood corporate officials. David DeLayden and Sandra Merritt, the two pro-life undercover journalists who exposed Planned Parenthood in 2015 for admitting on camera that they sell the organs and pieces of babies from abortions to third-party labs like Advanced Bioscience Resource Lab in Northern California. And so first they profit off of murdering the baby, then they profit off of selling the pieces, which creates a market for the means that created the pieces in the first place. Do you understand how this works? It's like, well, where are you getting the pieces from? From abortions. So it incentivizes you to kill more babies so you can get more pieces to continue selling them and breaking federal law by trafficking in fetal organ parts. This got exposed from undercover journalists. Kamala Harris, just to remind everyone, because the election is like 2.5 weeks away, she used your taxpayer dollars to send state agents whose taxpayer dollars pays their salary to break into the homes of private citizens to steal their footage because her biggest campaign donor was Planned Parenthood. These two undercover journalists, David DeLayden in particular, Chad, is the only undercover journalist in California history to be criminally indicted for undercover journalism that exposed illegal behavior. Meaning any other undercover journalist whose work exposed illegal behavior, no one's going after the journalist. We're saying thank you.
Right.
He gets pulled up on criminal charges.
Because it's Planned Parenthood.
They're still coming after him today in 2024. They're still coming after him today.
Yeah.
Trying to ruin this kid's life. He's a little older than me. He's a pro-life hero for what he's done for the movement exposing this stuff. That just scratches the surface about who Kamala Harris is.
For me, when
they will
it comes to voting,
destroy the pro-life cause. They will halt all pro-life legislative efforts. They will go after pregnancy resource centers like nothing you've ever seen before. They will mainstream the abortion pill. They'll continue to ship it into pro-life states that have banned abortion. Yo, we're in Texas, right? Abortion is illegal here. Do you know it's made almost no difference? Now, wait, don't hear me being a pessimist. I'm grateful Roe got overturned. It was a wonderful thing. It had to happen. And now it's time for the pro-life movement to really arise. But because of the RU-486 abortion pill and the Biden-Harris administration, they've been shipping it via snail mail into the mailboxes of young women who live in states where abortion is illegal. Did you know that? Did you know that Planned Parenthood's statistical research branch, the Guttmacher Institute, reported a few months ago that the abortion pill was responsible for 63% of the abortions in 2023? Now, How many abortions, how many babies were killed just that were captured in the reporting in 2023? Over 1 million babies were killed in 2023 through legalized abortion. That's after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Chad. More babies were killed in 2023 than were killed in 2022 or 2021 or 2020 or 2019 or 2018 or 2017. The first year after the overturning of Roe, apparently Americans are more bloodthirsty and killed more babies in the first year following Roe v. Wade than before Roe v. Wade got overturned. 63% of those million were not surgical abortions. They were not a vacuum catheter tube. They were not forceps. They were a little pill. It's a 2-regimen pill called RU486, mifepristone and misoprostol. Mifepristone or Mifeprex cuts off the hormone progesterone, without which the lining of the uterus breaks down. All nutrients to the child through the umbilical cord is cut off, and the child starves to death. 24 to 72 hours later, you take misoprostol, which forces your uterus to have contractions. And bro, this is by the book. By the book, you don't go back to an abortion clinic. Many times these women aren't even getting the pill at the abortion clinic. They're getting the abortion pill through the mail. You're told to sit on the toilet, don't look, and flush. I just had a woman on my show, the Seth Gruber Show, recently, Chad, who now she's been healed and redeemed, and she's using her voice to save babies. So she's gone through the work to be able to speak and tell her story now. But she went through the abortion pill. She said, they told me it was going to be like a heavy period. Turns out my son drops out of my vagina into the toilet, and I'm looking at a child in the toilet. We flushed 630,000 babies down the toilets of the American sewage system in 2023. The blood of our sewers literally run red with the blood of our children, and we wonder why we're under the judgment of God in America. 630,000 babies killed through a Nazi-era relic abortion pill. We'll get to that in just one second. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will be to unborn babies what Hitler was to the Jews. So you absolutely have to vote for the lesser of two evils to stop that wickedness. Yeah. Give us the chance to fight and preserve the family and babies and the next generation and the gender insanity and bring a stop to this stuff. But we should keep working and raising our voice to tell Trump, stand for life, stand for the unborn, fulfill your promises. So
but I want to say that helps, but I have to say it to those, because I hear it so much, to those who say, I just can't, my conscience won't let me vote. If you don't vote in this election, a non-vote is a vote for Harris, and so you're complicit in this.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chad.
Yeah.
Silence in the face of evil is itself evil, said Bonhoeffer. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. God will not hold us guiltless. Do you know the privilege and blessing you have, American, of being able to vote? Most humans throughout human history would be shocked to learn that there's this thing that happened called America, and you were able not just to vote for like your king, your president, but like there was like separated powers. And so like you could have like a state that like functions as a mini government, and they could do things differently that from other states, and it was like divided powers. And then like you could do things at the county and city level that was different from the state level. And if you didn't like some of the like laws and policies being pushed, you could like go vote people out. Like we have taken this privilege for granted for so long, we forget how rare it is.
Yeah, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, like those things, the separation of powers.
If you're not willing,
so unique and so powerful.
Just vote.
Yeah.
Don't complain to Chad and I if things go wrong in November.
I mean, look, it's super simple.
It is.
You pick the 5 top things that are most important to you, and you find the policy, not the candidate.
Yeah,
align with those. The policy, not the candidate. And for those who are a Christian, you find the policy that aligns most with a biblical worldview, and you vote on that.
Amen.
Not that align with it, that most align with it.
Yeah. Listen, here's the best cap on this, so summary on this, Chad. Vote to promote righteousness and restrain evil insofar as you can, given current political realities.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, we're going to get into Planned Parenthood, but you brought something.
Want to talk about the Nazis now?
I want to talk about the Nazis. Yeah, I do. But you said something that I was going to save to them, but I'm going to ask it right now because you just mentioned it. There are probably millions of women in America that have chosen to abort, and some of them regret it, some of them don't.
Yeah.
Some of them are hurting because of it.
Yeah.
And what would you say to those women? We're talking like this is such an evil.
Yep.
And some of these women may feel like we're talking to them.
Yeah.
But I know you love them.
understand, Chad, that when I call abortion the sacrament of Satan and child sacrifice to pagan demons, I understand what I'm saying. I understand that that's a hard word to fall on the ears or shoulders of a woman or man. Can't forget the dads.
Yeah, true.
Who had played a role in an abortion. And so I'm not going to pull my punches. I'm going to call abortion child sacrifice to demons. It's why we're under the judgment of God in America. And people are like, Seth, that's so weird. Like people aren't like, putting a Baphomet or Baal statue in their living room or at their Planned Parenthood facility and saying, here are the children. Why are you calling it sacrifice? It's so weird, Seth. Listen, Satan doesn't care the name of the God that you sacrifice your children to. As long as you continue to shove children down his throat, he will say yes and amen. He's bloodthirsty. He loves to kill children. So if your God is convenience, self, education, family, money, or career well-being, it doesn't matter. It's still pagan demon worship. Like you're still sacrificing babies. But listen, if this is part of your story, man or woman, if you paid for an abortion, pressured an abortion as the dad, if you're the woman and you got an abortion, you didn't even tell the boyfriend that you were pregnant and you killed his son or daughter without him even knowing about it. If you're a teenager who is pressured by your degenerate deadbeat dad to go kill his grandkid, by the way, you're not liable or responsible for that. If your dad was forcing you to have an abortion, completely different than if you're a 21-year-old who got an abortion because you wanted to finish college and you just didn't want to be responsible. I understand it's a very big fabric of stories that can be very different.
The doctors, right?
What's that?
Even the doctors.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have friends who are former abortionists.
Yeah.
Who have repented. They're part of pro-life activism now. And it's kind of a Saul to Paul kind of story. And it's beautiful. But listen, regardless of where you find yourself on this story, I just want to remind you, as a believer in the gospel of Jesus Christ, I'm not here to shame or condemn you. I believe that Jesus is just as eager to forgive the sin of abortion as any other sin. Abortion is not a blacklist sin, Chad, that somehow removes you from the grace of God. And if you want evidence of this, by the way, from the Bible, have you ever heard of this guy named King David?
I did.
He's a man after God's own heart. You know what his other title was, Chad?
Murderer, adulterer.
Peeping Tom.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Yeah, oh, yeah. By the way, that's
he
why,
acted on it,
that's
too.
why The Chosen is never going to make the Old Testament series.
Yeah.
I don't think Christians could watch that. I think that would be like Game of Thrones or something. I don't think we could watch that and like be very comfortable with our Christian convictions. And so, ooh la la, Bathsheba, shower, David on a roof, sipping back on some Cabernet while his army is leading a battle he should be at the front lines of. By the way, men, be wary of idle hands. They're the devil's playground. Men are supposed to go to war in the fall. And when you're on your roof getting drunk, checking out women, taking a shower, today's alternative, that would be OnlyFans and pornography. You're not fighting the battles that God has called you to go win for the kingdom of God. And it's the same thing happening with King David. The background of that story is he should have been leading his army in a battle that was happening somewhere else. He let them go do that while he's getting drunk on his porch watching Bathsheba take a shower naked. It just shows that you can go from a real degenerate to a mighty man of valor and a man after God's own heart if you care more about pleasing Jesus than your comfortable cush pornography, lazy lifestyle, okay? And so decides that enjoying Bathsheba visually is not enough, impregnates her, murders her husband, and the prophet Nathan confronts David regarding his sin, and David repents. He repents.
He tells him, "You are that man." That's one of my favorite stories.
That's right. Yeah,
you are that man.
Yeah, he tries to sort of cover it up, and then he realizes this story is about me. He repents. God accepts that repentance as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to him. But there were still consequences to David's sin. If you know that story, you'll know that God strikes the child dead that was conceived from his adulterous union with Bathsheba.
Yeah.
You know what King David says there? He says, "My son will not return to me, but I will go to him." That is your proof, positive promise from the scriptures that if you have killed your baby through abortion, if you repent like King David, you believe, you cling to Jesus and the gospel, you will be forgiven. However, like King David, you're also going to see your baby in heaven again one day. He says, "I will go to him, my son, in heaven." And he's seated on the lap of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, waiting to welcome you into eternal glory. So if you've had an abortion, paid for an abortion, provided it, played a role in it, there's hope. There's healing, there's forgiveness. If there's grace for King David, there's grace for you, baby.
Yeah.
King David, notice, arranged the death of an innocent human being to hide and cover up his own sexual sin.
Who's his friend, right?
Yeah, many people get abortions to hide and cover up their own sexual sin. But there's always grace. There's always grace. And I think that actually helping heal the post-abortive men and women of America will be one of the secret backdoor entrances to ending abortion in America. They say 1 in 4 women have had an abortion in America. That means 1 in 4 men have either not been told or helped provide and pay for that abortion as well. That's a lot of people, bro. If we can have them healed and redeemed and set free to now be used as a voice for life and tell their stories and warn people to not do what they did, I want you to stand at the gates of hell and redirect traffic. But you're not going to be able to do that if you're not healed and redeemed. And so,
yeah, that's awesome. I thought it was very important for us to mention because...
and that should be coming from the pulpits and the pastors.
Absolutely.
Not from me. That should be coming from the Church of the Living God.
Yeah. Who had the moral courage to speak on this. Planned Parenthood.
How did it all happen?
Yeah. Who is Planned Parenthood really? I mean, Planned Parenthood is not.
Well, I thought it was in the name, Chad. I thought it was just Planning Parenthood.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they do?
Well, they do the opposite of that, from what I observed and from what I've seen in the 1916 Project film.
It's reproductive rights. Wait, but reproduction's already occurred. It's reproductive health care. No, it's not. The thing's already reproduced, so you don't get to kill it. I mean, all of these things are so dumb. Journalist Paul Greenberg coined a really succinct axiom. He said, verbicide precedes homicide. Verbicide precedes homicide. It's the distortion by euphemism of language to camouflage or at least blunt the truth about the real killing that they want to do. What I mean by that is you first have to dehumanize and deperson the groups of individuals that you want to mistreat or exterminate. So remember, Dred Scott v. Sanford, the Supreme Court case that said black people are not persons. They never said they weren't humans. They said they weren't persons. The Heathgericht, the German Supreme Court, said that Jews were not persons in the legal sense. Roe versus Wade, 1973, said the term person is used in the Constitution does not include the unborn. So you always have to dehumanize your victim class to make their mistreatment or murder sort of socially acceptable. And of course, the links between the Nazis and Planned Parenthood and the American eugenicists are so shocking that it takes Chad freaking Robichaux to help make this mainstream this information to people because it's so shocking.
I was shocked when you started telling me some of this stuff. Like when I started learning some of this stuff, I knew Planned Parenthood was evil. I knew who Margaret Sanger was, but I did not understand.
I think
Nazi
what
ties.
you just said is probably most good normal Americans. They're like, I know abortion's wrong. I know Planned Parenthood's evil. Oh, but you don't know how evil.
Yeah,
like. Come down the rabbit trail with me. Y'all ready to enter the looking glass with Alice and Seth Gruber? It's way worse than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just set that up because everything we're about to talk about, you'll realize a key aspect of leftism and progressivism is redefining everything. It's inventing new soft soap, really flowery, nice sounding terms to describe things that are absolutely disgusting, evil, and demonic. Okay. That's an important aspect to understand how the left operates. Is abortion's health care, slavery's plantation care, slavery is property rights. They'll never actually describe the thing in question. Okay. So how did this thing Planned Parenthood happen? Well, firstly, it's important for you to understand when we talk about Planned Parenthood, here's what we're actually saying and talking about. Planned Parenthood is the best funded 501c3 organization in human history. They're the largest abortion provider in the world. People forget it's not just Planned Parenthood, it's the IPPF as well, the International Planned Parenthood Federation. International. They got clinics all around the world, Chad. This is not just an American thing.
And it's funded.
Bill and Melinda Gates have given $80 million to the International Planned Parenthood Federation.
And the U.S. government, our taxpayer dollars.
$700 million in 2023. $700 million in 2023 to Planned Parenthood from the federal government.
How much does the federal government subsidize for adoptions?
Right, exactly.
Not
Exactly.
700 million.
It is a scandal.
It is zero, right?
It is a scandal that it is so cheap to kill a child.
What?
And so expensive to adopt one.
If you care about the well-being of a baby, why would you put $700 million a year into aborting babies, but not even $1 into adopting babies? Clearly there's an intent there.
These people are antinatalists, anti-human.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of people that want to adopt babies.
They believe, Chad, that human beings are a net negative on planet Earth.
Bill Gates being one of...
You have to understand.
He's openly said this, right?
These people are anti-natalist Mother Gaia worshipers.
Right.
They care more about the rights of animals and the dirt. Mother Earth, who's a demon, by the way. Mother Gaia.
Yeah.
It's like pagan worship stuff. Than human beings. Like G.K. Chesterton said, these people combine a hardening of the heart with a sympathetic softening of the head. Meaning they're hard-hearted and really stupid. But don't mistaken that for lack of zeal. Their ideology is very dangerous. So you can't really answer the question, why would they fund abortions but not adoptions, until you go into the history behind what created Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood today is also the largest provider of that pornographic comprehensive sexuality education in America's public schools. That filth in the school districts, it's bringing these like hundreds and thousands of mama bears to school board meetings.
And our big giant friend, John Machuku. Yeah. Going, yeah.
I love that brother. He's in my movie, by the way.
Yeah.
He's in my movie, The 1916 Project, which y'all can go see right now. Go to the1916project.com. And if you're listening to this on October 21st, it comes out tomorrow, streaming on X, on Twitter. But you can go to the1916project.com to learn all about that. But Planned Parenthood says on their own website, Chad, they're the largest provider of comprehensive sexuality education. And by that, I ain't talking about the birds and the bees. No. You have to understand, like when we talk about comprehensive sex ed, it's sperm and egg and it's a baby. Like that's not what CSE is. No, that has gender theory, transgenderism. It talks about pornography. It talks about anal sex. It talks about gay marriage. It talks about every weird way to practice any kind of thing sexually, and this is like teaching for minors. By the way, and
it's illustrated in graphic pictures.
Yep, cartoons with phalluses and the safety of anal sex allegedly, and all this kind of weird stuff. By the way, it teaches minors how to get abortions without parental consent. Remember, I'm the weirdo that does this full time, and I actually study the curriculum. It teaches minors how to get abortions without parental consent and circumvent the law and get a judicial bypass so they don't have to have their parents' permission for them to get an abortion when they're under 18. All of this stuff is part of comprehensive sex ed. I can tell you the history on that
That's
too.
paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars.
A lot of it. And Planned Parenthood says they're the largest provider of that. Why am I telling you all this stuff? Because we're not just talking about an abortion organization. This really isn't a pro-life episode on Resilient. It's how did all of this junk and crap happen? You can't like isolate the killing of babies in like an isolated little box and just deal with abortion apart from dealing with cultural Marxism, transgenderism, gender theory, communism, the sexual revolution, paganism. Like all this stuff goes together, and you have to be able to deal with these things in totalities if you want to understand the worldview behind what drives these things and why this stuff is unfolding so quickly before our eyes in the 21st century. Why so many of us are a little bit freaked out to hand America to our children and to the next generation. You have to understand where it came from. Lastly, Planned Parenthood is now the second largest provider of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for America's gender-confused youth. You just heard me correctly, listeners of Resilient. Planned Parenthood is almost the largest provider of transgender drugs now in America. Trans drugs for teens is Planned Parenthood's fastest growing revenue stream. And by the way, it creates permanent clients. You kill one baby, you make one sale. You chemically castrate a minor who thinks they're the other gender, they need drugs for life now. And Planned Parenthood is very happy to provide those. It is incredibly more profitable for Planned Parenthood to chemically castrate America's gender-confused youth than it is to kill babies.
And they're also teaching our youth how to do that without parental consent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Tim Walz, go back to Tim Walz, Minnesota. There's a law in Minnesota, thanks to Kamala Harris's VP running mate, that functionally would allow the state to take your gender-confused minor from you if one or both parents refuse to use the pronouns and support the social affirmation and chemical intervention of their gender-confused minor. The state could functionally take your kid. That happened in California. I'm in another documentary called The War on Children. I didn't make this one, but it's called The War on Children. Elon Musk tweeted out the entire film earlier this year on X. It's the most popular documentary this year. And there's a mom in that documentary that I'm in the film with whose daughter was taken from her in the state of California.
How could someone vote for a candidate that has signed legislation to take children away?
Well, they're saying it's a conspiracy theory, and they're saying that
no, it's legislation.
That Seth Gruber and Chad Robichaux are lying about that. I read the legislation, and nowhere in there is there a line that says if you have a gender confused minor, the state can take them from your home by CPS if you don't use their pronouns. But what you have to understand about how the left operates is that statecraft, and what I'm talking about is statecraft, I mean lawmaking, writing laws. When you look at laws and legislation written by radical leftists in the Democrat Party, here's all that you need to know. Listen to me very carefully. Don't ask yourself, what does the bill allow don't ask yourself, what does the bill say or prescribe? Ask yourself, what does the bill not say? And through its very fluffy and absence of language, would it allow this thing? The way the left writes bills today and laws is not prescribing what it allows. It's writing it in such open-ended language that it would allow for the thing that they want. That's how you have to read laws now written by the left. So when you approach it from that circumstance,
it confuses voting.
Yeah, exactly. Completely.
I mean, that's in Florida. Like if you read the abortion thing in Florida, you read it right away, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to support this, like because this is government overreach. And then you get in there and actually read it.
Verbicide precedes homicide.
Yeah,
the distortion by euphemism of language to camouflage or at least blunt the truth about the real killing that they want to do. George Orwell said in his famous essay, Politics in the English Language, he said, political correctness is designed to make lies sound truthful, murder respectable, and to give the appearance of solidity to pure wind. Anyways.
Yeah.
So what's Planned Parenthood?
Yeah.
Well, here's why history is important. Some people think that I don't know, why do you have to tell these details about what happened 100 years ago? Because it's connected to now. It's a biblical concept that bad seed yields a bitter harvest. So if you understand the seed of a thing, you could probably predict what the tree or the plant's going to end up like. And if the tree and plant is super rotten and nasty and ugly and its fruit really doesn't taste good, you could probably kind of know it was a bad seed.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult. Hilaire Belloc, who was G.K. Chesterton's best friend, Hilaire Belloc has a beautiful line that really explains why what I'm about to tell you with history is important. He said, to comprehend the history of something is to unlock the mysteries of its present, and more, to discover the profundities of its future. In other words, when you comprehend the history of something, that helps you understand how it's still happening now, but also where it's going to go in the future, those ideas, if they're not stopped. So we don't study history to necessarily understand all the complexities of what happened then. We study history to understand how that's still happening now.
Yeah.
So that's why history kind of writ large is important. So this woman, Margaret Sanger, she founded the American Birth Control League in 1921, later renamed Planned Parenthood. But her first clinic was opened in 1916. So the 1916 Project is the name of my film and book. That was the first Planned Parenthood clinic, basically. Margaret Sanger is probably the most successful leftist revolutionary of the 20th century, meaning her work and her revolution is more connected to the 21st century insanity we're living through than any other weirdo revolutionary of the 20th century, in my opinion, including Alfred Kinsey. And we can get into that. But even Alfred Kinsey and Hugh Hefner couldn't have been who they were and accomplished what they did without Margaret Sanger. And I can explain exactly why that is and prove all that. But so Margaret Sanger is a turn of the century revolutionary whose father was a bitter atheist. And that obviously had a huge impact on her life. And in 1912, 1913, Margaret Sanger's living in Greenwich Village, New York City, right, where the show Friends takes place. and she this is really where so much of the rot of bad ideas comes from. I mean, New York City is probably the most culturally formative city in the world. So she's living in Greenwich Village, and she begins to attend these sort of bohemian salons and gatherings of mainly rich white people. I'm not a big fan of the race card, but it's funny that those always telling minorities what's best for them. They're always rich white elites. And I find that really interesting.
It hasn't changed.
Yeah, that's right. Well, remember, Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, said, I'll have those Negroes voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Although he used a different word for Negroes. But and so Margaret Sanger's meeting in these gatherings with these leftist revolutionaries. And they would deliver lectures, right, on like how to tear down the fruits of Christendom, how to replace Christianity, all these conservative Christians. They were all Marxists and communists. And I don't throw that word out like haphazardly, like they actually were.
Yeah, they were card carrying.
At those early gatherings in Greenwich Village was a guy named Roger Baldwin, who became the co-founder of the ACLU. Are you starting to sense some of the integration that was happening between the secular moral revolutionaries as they were carefully planning and plotting the culture of death that's unfolding before our eyes so quickly in the 21st century? But I want to fast forward to 2020 and then go back and tell you how she had board members whose books the Nazis were reading, and how she had board members who were part of the KKK. But I want to go to 2020 really quickly.
Yeah.
Have you heard the phrase, the revolution always eats its own?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really good theater for me. I love it. I think the revolution eating its own is hilarious.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a little bit of my sinful flesh, but so George Floyd, right? 9 months before George Floyd, the 1619 Project. Not mine, not 1916.
1619.
The 1619 Project from Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's a purple-haired Marxist. She actually literally has purple hair. She's a Marxist. And it's the New York Times project. And it says the 1619 Project, a new founding. That was the subtitle. What do they mean? A new founding of what? A new founding of America. The message, and I've read almost or all of the essays from the book, The 1619 Project, which is now a special on Hulu. It's a series, docuseries on Hulu right now.
Yeah.
And
it's anti-American propaganda.
Exactly. It says America is systemically racist, root and branch. Everything is racist. And it all goes back to 1619, allegedly, when the first black slaves came to American shores. They say that's a new founding for America. What are they saying? They're saying 1776 should not be America's birthday. 1619 should be America's birthday. Why? Because that event of the first slaves coming to American shores, that represents who we are today, right? So we got to defund the police. We obviously got to burn down courthouses and police stations, because the police force used to be used to round up escaped slaves and return them to their plantations. And so, like, if it was racist then, it's racist now. You can't just trim racist branches and save the tree. If the roots are racist, you got to burn the whole thing down. And they were literally burning down American cities in 2020s. And then because of 1619, they start calling for canceling anything that's racist. I mean, you remember the shakedown of major corporations who wouldn't host Ibram X. Kendi as a speaker, who wrote the book, not White Fragility. That was Robin DiAngelo that Matt Walsh tricked into speaking with him in his new film, Am I Racist? Hilarious. But no, Ibram X. Kendi wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist. Right. And so these like left-wing Marxists, critical race theorists, would do these shakedowns of major corporations. It's just race hustling. Like, if you don't sponsor or pay me thousands of dollars to do a critical race theory teaching for your corporation, I might just insinuate you're a racist. And then Aunt Jemima's got to go, obviously. So we can't buy Aunt Jemima syrup anymore, because that's racist. And then people called the BLM, mostly peaceful, somewhat fiery BLM arson riotery protests in 2020 that Kamala Harris was raising funds to pay the bail to get the rioters back out onto the streets. Another reason you shouldn't vote for Kamala Harris. The left-wing journalists called that summer of 2020, Chad, the 1619 riots. So they're connecting it. Right. They're saying because of 1619, slavery, everything's racist. People are justified in looting and burning and pillaging because of the legacy of American slavery and racism. And then guess what? They went after Planned Parenthood. You thought I was going on a tangent. I wasn't. I'm connecting it all back to Margaret Sanger. So everything's racist. So you suck, Aunt Jemima, you suck, cancel. Yo, you were racist back then, you're racist now. Defund the police. And then Planned Parenthood found itself in the crosshairs of the radical left. This is freaking hilarious. This was not pro-lifers, Chad. These were people who were already pro-abortion.
Marxists on Marxists.
Marxists on Marxists. And they went to Planned Parenthood in July of 2020, and they said, Planned Parenthood, your founder, Margaret Sanger, She was a racist and a eugenicist. And I'm like,
And they were right.
I'm sitting here going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
G.K. Chesterton was saying that in 1925. Ronald Reagan said that. William F. Buckley, Bill Buckley said that. Every conservative has been saying that for the last century, but because the revolution always eats its own, they go, yeah, you got to cancel her. And so because of pressure from what? The disciples of the 1619 Project that led Planned Parenthood to cancel their founder in 2020. What happened that July of 2020, Chad? The director of Planned Parenthood of Greater New York came out. Her name's Karen Seltzer. She comes out and she says, we're done making excuses for our founder and the damage that she did to communities of color. That was the quote. The damage she did to communities of color? I'm sorry, did you just admit that your founder harmed Black people and their livelihoods and lives? And so they still have a Manhattan Planned Parenthood clinic. It's like the mega. The other mega Planned Parenthood clinic is in Houston, but they can't do surgical abortions anymore because surgical abortions are banned in Texas. But the Manhattan, New York City, mega Planned Parenthood clinic. Guess what it was called? The Sanger Health Center. They took her name off the building in July of 2020, just like they do with the statues of America's founders. They took her name off the building, and then the corner of that street was called the Margaret Sanger Square. New York City, responding to Planned Parenthood canceling its own founder, jumps and joins their revolution and takes the sign off of that was called the Margaret Sanger Square. So the city cancels Sanger and Planned Parenthood cancels Sanger, and homeschool Seth over here's got some questions. Like, why is she suddenly worthy to be canceled? I'm sorry. Nancy Pelosi got the Margaret Sanger Award. Y'all gave Hillary Clinton the Margaret Sanger Award. Kamala Harris was trying really hard to get the Margaret Sanger Award, but Planned Parenthood stopped giving it out because they canceled her. So I open up my entire film and book, The 1916 Project, Chad, with the question, if they've lied to you about their hero and patron saint of feminism, what else have they lied to you about? And what's the real history behind the secular moral revolution, the neo-Marxist revolution, the sexual revolution, and the history of the best funded nonprofit in human history? The history of that has been buried because the left understands that if it were to become common knowledge to the American voter, their revolution would come to a very abrupt halt. What are some aspects of that revolution? Welcome to part 3 of Resilient with Chad Robichaux and Seth Gruber. So when she founded Planned Parenthood in 1921, she had a board member named Lothrop Stoddard. And here's where we're going to get really red-pilled here. Lothrop Stoddard, founding board member of Planned Parenthood in 1921. Lothrop Stoddard was the exalted cyclops of the Massachusetts KKK. Everyone okay? Let's take a chance and breathe here.
What level was that?
Oh, high up.
High up, yeah.
His title was the exalted cyclops of the Massachusetts Ku Klux Klan. He's the founding board member of Planned Parenthood. Now, did Margaret Sanger kick him off the board? Oh no, he held that position for years. He did his dissertation on eugenics at Harvard University, boiled it down for the masses, and published the book.
Tell everybody what eugenics.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I take some of the stuff for granted. What is eugenics? Let me say it again. Eugenics. Okay, what names did you just think of? Were you thinking of Hitler, Mao Zedong, Mussolini, Joseph Stalin? Good job. You're right close to home, y'all. If you thought of those names, that's eugenics. The root word for eugenics, Chad, means good in birth. Good in birth? Well, then that would mean that some people are not good in birth. And so there's good genes and bad genes, allegedly, and the elites should decide who gets to reproduce and who shouldn't. That's eugenics in its most simple form. Eugenics was a phrase coined by Francis Galton. Francis Galton invented the word eugenics. He's the modern father of the eugenics movement. Francis Galton had a cousin. What's his cousin's name? Charles Darwin. So we went awfully quickly from the premise, survival of the fittest and man is an animal, to the eugenics movement in the same family, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, who says we need to obliterate the unfit. He takes his cousin's book, Origin of Species, and says, if we need survival of the fittest,
because evolution is survival of the fittest, right?
Yep.
And now when you go to eugenics, you're like,
but Galton took it a step further and said, we don't just allow nature to take its course. That would be very Darwinian, right?
Right.
Survival of the fittest, we're all animals, so the strong will survive, the weak will die, and we just let nature play its course. Galton takes it a step further and says, well, actually, if we want the survival of the fittest, then the strong must kill the weak in order to survive.
And that's eugenics.
Yeah. So we went literally from Darwinism to eugenics, not just in the same generation, but in the same freaking family. Okay? Just so you understand how dangerous ideas can be. Ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. So that's where eugenics comes from, okay? Eugenics can take many different forms because eugenics is a lot harder to kind of pin down than racism. Like racism, like looks at like melanin and skin color, right? Just like one ethnicity, and for whatever reason, this group hates this ethnicity. It's disgusting. It's vile. It's a complete assault and inversion of the image of God. But racism is a little more simple to define. Eugenics is not. Because every new generation of elites might come up with a new category for who the fit are and who the unfit are, what good genes represents and what bad genes represents. Eugenics can open up anyone to being sort of defined out of existence by the elite class.
Jews, conservatives.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, Hillary Clinton said the deplorables and irredeemables. And I'm thinking, oh, wait, sounds a little bit like unfit and undesirables. I've heard that language before. By the way, lest you think I'm jesting or being sensationalist in my rhetoric, I know Hillary Clinton called us deplorables and irredeemables in 2015 or 2016. But this year, or was it late 2023? About a year ago in 2023, she said on national television that we might need to consider a formal deprogramming of all MAGA voters.
Yeah, she did say that.
Do you understand what they mean when they say MAGA, by the way? They just mean anyone that voted for Trump. Like you could bite your tongue off voting for Trump and kind of hate him, but you know you have to vote for him. And you're still MAGA, according to the left, right? A formal deprogramming, that sounds like gulags. That sounds like re-education camps. We've also seen that before. So, okay, so that's eugenics, okay? And so Margaret Sanger called herself a eugenicist. Just so you understand, like I'm not like injecting my commentary here. She referred to herself as a eugenicist. She once said she said eugenics without birth control seems to us a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising streams of the unfit. So what's she saying? I'm building this house called eugenics. But if I build it without birth control, then it's a house built on the sand. She's using a biblical metaphor, by the way, right? The house built on the solid rock and the house built on the sands. She said eugenics without birth control is a house built on the sands. So the way we need to use birth control is as a tool for the eugenics movement.
And to the unfit.
To target the unfit and propagandize birth control in minority neighborhoods, in groups of populations that we don't want reproducing. And in 1939, Margaret Sanger launched the Negro Project. And here's the opening proposal of the Negro Project as written by Sanger and her team. Yes, I'm a weirdo who's memorized all this stuff because I was homeschooled. Ready for this? Quote, the mass of Negroes, particularly in the South, are still breeding carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. Notice how she keeps using the word fit and unfit?
Unfit, yeah.
Fit and unfit. I know of another guy who used the phrase fit and unfit. So it says Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot, Mussolini, Mao Zedong. Okay. Here's another Margaret Sanger quote. Birth control is not contraception, thoughtlessly and indiscriminately practiced. Birth control means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks. Those human weeds, which threaten the blossoming of the finest flowers of American civilization. Are you starting to understand what eugenics is now, listener? There are human flowers and human weeds. There are the fit and the unfit. There are people with really good genes, and we want them to have a lot of kids. And then there's people that we just don't like these aspects of their culture. And so we should forcibly sterilize them. In 1927, there was a Supreme Court decision, Chad, called Buck versus Bell. In 1927, in an 8-1 decision, 8-1. So almost the entire Supreme Court of America in 1927 passed a case called Buck versus Bell. Guess what it allowed? It allowed the state to forcibly sterilize Americans considered a threat to the gene pool. In the next 15 years, over 70,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized by state governments. Oh, Seth, are you talking about Hitler? No, I'm talking about America. Now, listen, I'm a patriot. I love America. But we have to understand, like, we had a lot of evil, and still do, politicians in America who have been behind these movements. Do you understand what forcible sterilization means? It means that doctors strapped men and women down on medical tables and snip, and tied the woman's tubes. So you are not allowed to have children. Ever heard of the Nuremberg trials? Oh, it's when we got all the Nazis together and we said, we're going to hang you all. So at the Nuremberg trials, the Nazis cited our Supreme Court decision, Buck versus Bell, in their defense. They cited American Supreme Court eugenics decisions in their defense, as if to say, who are you Americans to judge us? Y'all were doing eugenics first. Margaret Sanger endorsed, Margaret Sanger endorsed and celebrated that decision publicly in 1927 when it was decided. Sanger called for segregation and sterilization camps for the mentally and physically defective that she didn't think should be allowed to have children. This is all in my book, The 1916 Project, which goes way deeper than the film, but the film is beautiful. So anyways, this board member she had, Lothrop Stoddard, not only was he a high official of the Massachusetts KKK, he was really well loved by the Nazis. And he wrote a book called The Menace of the Underman. And you're like, what? The Menace of the Underman? Who's the Underman? Well, for him, it was blacks, Slavs, Italians, Jews, and the mentally and physically disabled. The Nazi Party paid for the translation of his book, The Menace of the Underman, into German. It was featured in Nazi school textbooks in the 30s. Alfred Rosenberg, Hitler's chief racial theorist in the Nazi Party, co-opted the term Underman, the menace of the Underman, translated it into German, and featured it in his book Der Untermensch, which was the Nazi Party's chief propagandist book. Untermensch. Untermensch later meaning subhuman to refer to the Jews. Lothrop Stoddard's German translated version of his book was translated from Underman to Untermensch. Historians believe that the Nazis got the term Untermensch, or subhuman, from Planned Parenthood, from their founding board member, Lothrop Stoddard, a high official of the Massachusetts KKK. He was then invited to the Third Reich in 1939. Let me tell you again, this is Margaret Sanger's board member, financier, funder, and guest writer for her magazine. He's invited to meet with Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, Joseph Goebbels, Alfred Rosenberg. He's the only American to have had a one-on-one meeting with Adolf Hitler after he rose to power. The only American to have had a one-on-one meeting with Hitler is the founding board member of Planned Parenthood. Do you think that's not connected to what Planned Parenthood does today? Do you think that's not connected to how they operate today? When Margaret Sanger kept him on the board for years? He was later called the spiritual father of Nazi Germany, by the way. The spiritual father of Nazi Germany by one of Hitler's henchmen named Hans F. Gunther. All of this in the film and book, The 1916 Project. And so Margaret Sanger looked up to these kinds of people, looked up to these kinds of ideals. She had a good friend named Madison Grant, who was the founder of the American Eugenics Society. And Madison Grant's organization tried to convince Margaret Sanger to merge Planned Parenthood with the American Eugenics Society, meaning they told her, we're doing the same things. Planned Parenthood, American Eugenics Society, we believe the same things. We're doing the same things. We should merge our magazines to just be the same publication.
Targeting the same groups of benefit, right?
like I have the proof of that one, by the way, as well. That's a hard one for people to believe. The American Eugenics Society tried to tell Margaret Sanger, we're doing the same things. We should just merge our organizations, right? Well, the president of the American Eugenics Society at the time was named Madison Grant. Madison Grant once put a black man in a cage with a monkey at the New York City Bronx Zoo to, quote, illustrate evolution. His name was Oda Benga. If you want to go Google this, Oda, O-T-A, Oda Benga, a short African pygmy who was put behind bars at the New York City Bronx Zoo with a monkey on his shoulders. And the whole point of the spectacle was to illustrate evolution, right? He's just an animal anyways, right? Well, Madison Grant, a funder and friend, guest writer, and conference speaker for Margaret Sanger, funded that entire operation at the New York City Bronx Zoo with Oda Benga. By the way, that was so traumatic what they did to him, Ota Benga took his life and shot himself in the head several years later. So I'm just telling you the kind of people Margaret Sanger befriended and thought were really cool and hung out with. So Madison Grant one time was leading a committee meeting, and his assistant, Leon Whitney, interrupted the meeting. Leon Whitney had just gotten a letter from a German corporal recently out of prison and rising in the German political scene, thanking Leon Whitney for his writings on eugenics. Leon Whitney also wrote for Margaret Sanger's magazine. He wrote a piece called Selective Sterilization. Selective sterilization? We have to be selective about those we sterilize. You should have kids, you shouldn't. So Leon Whitney was part of the American Eugenics Society. He was the assistant to Madison Grant, the guy who put the black man in a cage with a monkey. So Leon Whitney runs over to his boss, Madison Grant, the president of the American Eugenics Society, and says, Madison, this is all documented, by the way, in his unpublished memoirs. Our writings are influencing the Germans. Madison Grant smiles and chuckles and pulls out his own letter and says, I know. He had just received from the same German corporal, recently out of prison, and rising in the German political scene after his failed coup attempt in Munich. The man who wrote that fan mail letters to Madison Grant and Leon Whitney was named Adolf Hitler. He called Madison Grant's book, The Passing of the Great Race, his Bible. Hitler called one of Margaret Sanger's best friend's books his Bible. It was very formative for him. Ever heard of Heinrich Himmler, one of Hitler's henchmen? Heinrich Himmler said that Lothrop Stoddard's book, remember he was the KKK guy and board member for Planned Parenthood. Heinrich Himmler said that Lothrop Stoddard's book, The Menace of the Underman, provided for him the blueprint for the creation of the final solution. We've only scratched the surface on the bad seed that created the best funded 501c3 in human history, the largest abortion provider in the world, the second largest provider of chemically castrating transgender drugs for America's gender-confused youth, the sponsor of the Negro Project that propagandized birth control in black enclaves and got black faces to be the front of the agenda to convince black Americans to cooperate in their own extermination. They're doing the same thing today.
Largely, Margaret Sanger's efforts were successful. I'm told that the majority, maybe 80 percentile of Planned Parenthoods are in black and brown communities. We have 13% of the population in America are black. If you break it down to ovulating women, 3 to 4% of black account for
in childbearing years.
Yeah, childbearing years account for. So you're talking 3 to 4% of black ovulated women can have babies, but they account for almost 50%, right?
40%.
Almost
40% of the nation's abortions.
So clearly
if you're a crooked capitalist who just wants to make money, think about this question for a second. Hey, you're a good business leader too, Chad.
Right.
Is 3 to 4% of your clientele base providing 40% of your revenue a really good bang for your buck? 3 to 4% of your customer base providing 40% of your income?
Yeah, it's a good bang for my buck.
Sounds pretty great.
Especially if I'm targeting it.
That's what they do with slaughtering black babies in America. The black population has been stagnant and flatlined for decades in America. They're way
it stayed at 13%.
We're all under replacement rate in America.
Yeah.
Like regardless, throw skin color out the window. Like just generally Americans are not replacing themselves, but nowhere is it worse than black America.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that's by design.
Through eugenics.
Yep.
And through Planned Parenthood, and it's funded by the United States government, the U.S. taxpayer.
Yep, that's right. But Planned Parenthood helps architect this stuff. See, that's the thing. It's like, it's not like the culture just coincidentally started spinning out of control and then Planned Parenthood profited off of it. Like you have to understand, like the institutions that people were talking about, they helped architect and plan this stuff. It's not coincidental. They're not just waking up one day and saying, oh, the culture is going kind of crazy. Maybe we can profit off of that by chemically castrating the youth, showing them porn in the schools and convincing them to kill their babies through abortion. It's like, no, you planned this stuff. You architected this stuff. You had a plan for this stuff. When Margaret Sanger was writing in 1914, 1915, these ideas were very unpopular. But that's the thing about revolutionaries on the left is they're usually way more passionate and committed to their cause than conservative Christians are to stop wickedness and stand for righteousness.
How'd she co-opt the black community to go along? Because clearly there's been acceptance. And so how'd she co-opt the black community to accept their own genocide?
Yeah, a lot of what we're seeing today in the Democrat Party's destruction of the black family while still convincing them to vote Democrat is connected to Margaret Sanger's agenda for Black America. I mean, remember, Lyndon LBJ with the Great Society Act would only cut checks to Black families if there was no father in the home, incentivizing fatherlessness in the Black family.
Which is
if dad's in the house, you don't get a government check.
Which is more sociology.
Yeah. If daddy's not in the home, single mom gets a check from the government.
You have to deconstruct a nuclear family to create a social dependence.
Well, BLM Incorporated before
it was on their website. BLM
before
was
they
on
attacked
their website.
Planned Parenthood because they had to kind of clean up some of their public image. They said on their own website, "We exist for the destruction of the nuclear family."
Taking the fathers out of home.
So this is not just about the babies, it's about destroying the whole family. These people are very open about this, by the way. Did you know Margaret Sanger once said the marriage bed is the most degenerative influence in the social order?
Yeah, I did see that quote.
The marriage bed? You mean like a husband and wife who have like committed themselves to each other for life? That's the most degenerative influence in the social order? Yes, that's what Alfred Kinsey believed. That's what every weird sexual revolutionary believed.
Because they were like engaged in wild orgies and all kind of crazy.
So yeah, we didn't even get into that. It's like, in 1914, Margaret Sanger has to flee New York City, Chad, because she's sending into the postal service and to people's mailboxes very obscene writings on illegal forms of douches and birth control and sexual literature that broke the obscenity laws at the time. By the way, we still have anti-obscenity laws on the books, some of them in America, but they're not enforced anymore.
Right.
What do I mean by anti-obscenity laws? It means like if I show pornography cartoons to your kids, you can have me arrested, praise God. But 38 states in America have obscenity exemption laws, meaning 38 states in America, this is so important, listen, because these are the laws that got Margaret Sanger in trouble in 1914, and these are the laws that are rarely enforced today. 38 states in America have obscenity exemption laws. So what that means is this, Chad, that vile pornographic sexual education curriculum that's in so many of America's public schools, that's bringing these angry moms and dads to school board meetings. If I showed that to your children in your home, did you know you could call the police and have me arrested?
Sure, yeah.
But if you put it in a classroom, it's considered educational because 38 states in America have obscenity exemption laws. Exemption. It's still obscene, but it's exempt. Show it to your friends' kids, get arrested. Have a teacher do it through a tax-funded public education system in the classroom. It's for education, so it's fine. That's the insanity of what's happening in the culture right now. Margaret Sanger broke the obscenity laws in 1914. So rather than get arrested, guess what Sanger does? She ships her kids off to be raised by her friends. She has her socialist friends in the New York labor movement forge her a passport, and she flees to England. She becomes the first Kamala Harris, and she sleeps her way up the levers of power. She sleeps with H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds, and she jumps into bed with a guy named Havelock Ellis. Havelock Ellis was basically the Alfred Kinsey of England. He was a sexual, impotent, degenerate weirdo who was impotent, so he was always trying to find new ways to get excited. That's the PG-13 version. And he hosted orgies in his home. He forced his wife to watch him as he participated in these entanglements with both men and women. And he begins an affair with a woman named Margaret Sanger. And she meets the Neo-Malthusians while in England, who are the population reduction movement people, which refers to Thomas Malthus, Malthusianism. He was the first guy in the late 1700s to say there's too many people on planet Earth, so we need to reduce the population. Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, it's all the same Neo-Malthusian stuff. She meets those people, but then she meets this guy Havelock Ellis. Well, guess what? Havelock Ellis, I'm going to connect this to 25 minutes ago. It's going to blow your mind. Guess who Havelock Ellis was mentored by? Francis Galton, the guy who coined the term eugenics. Darwin's cousin. He was mentored by Darwin's cousin, who invented the term eugenics. They were pen pals. I have proof of all this. So we moved awfully quickly from man as an animal, Darwin, to obliterate the unfit, eugenics, his cousin, to Havelock Ellis, the Alfred Kinsey of England, orgy-hosting sexual chaos weirdo. Guess who Margaret Sanger refers to as her most significant and influential mentor? Havelock Ellis. So we went from Darwinism to eugenics to sexual chaos to Planned Parenthood awfully quickly. That's how secular discipleship works. So yeah, she was involved in all manner of weird sexual adulterous affairs. I know it'll surprise you to learn that the founder of Planned Parenthood wasn't a great mother. It's kind of like a man bites dog story.
Well, I mean, out of Planned Parenthood comes the sexual education system that's in our schools today, funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars again.
You want to go
there. And you have people involved, or people like Hugh Hefner. that put the sexual education system in our school.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah.
You want to go down that rabbit hole with me?
I'd love to hear it.
All right. All right. If you're not disgusted yet, guys, this is going to be next level. If you got kids, this stuff's not easy to listen to. Okay. I've just been so calloused and jaded. I have to disconnect myself from this stuff because it's so wicked. So buckle up. Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood don't just benefit from the culture of death, they help create it. Here's another example of that. I told you Planned Parenthood calls himself the largest provider of comprehensive sexuality education in America's public schools. So sex ed is their sales funnel, abortion is their product, and your children are their prospects. Let me say that again. Sex ed is their sales funnel. Abortion is the product, and your children are their prospects. They are simultaneously the largest abortion provider in the world and the largest provider of pornographic curriculum in the schools, which sexualizes children because it exposes them to just the most vile stuff. I mean, like, penises and putting condoms on bananas and anal sex and homosexual and orgies. And, if you're two dudes and you want to touch each other, that's okay. Experiment. Like, I've looked at this stuff. It is vile and disgusting. That is called CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education. What if I told you Planned Parenthood invented that and architected it and pioneered it? What if I told you the largest abortion provider in the world pioneered, set the spark that lit the flame to the sexualization of our children agenda in America? Now let's prove it. If you know anything yet from Weird Homeschool Seth, it's that I do prove the things I say. They might sound extreme and insane, but I will prove it. In 1964, Margaret Sanger had just died or was on her deathbed. And her medical director, Mary Calderone, some people called her Calderoni, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Mary Calderone was the national medical director for Planned Parenthood. This is not just some weird, low employee, like she was up there. She leaves Planned Parenthood in 64. And she founds the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States. The acronym is SIECUS, okay? SIECUS, SIECUS. SIECUS becomes the pioneer organization for all the weird, porn, obscene stuff for the kids, for the minors in America's public schools. They pioneer it. They invent it. That becomes the beginning of comprehensive sexuality education. Chad, guess who gave the seed money to found SIECUS? Guess who fronted the money to establish SIECUS, founded by Planned Parenthood's medical director? Hugh Hefner.
Founder of Playboy.
Okay, I'm about to go way deeper, but I just want you to pause for a second, listener, and realize that the man who made hot young women dress up like bunnies and have sex with them and pay them to do so, the founder of Playboy magazine, provided the founding money for the group that became the pioneer of the weird sex curriculum that shows kids all weird forms of sexual stuff.
In our schools today.
Have you heard the phrase conflict of interest before? Conflict of interest. So sex ed is the sales funnel. Playboy magazines and abortions are their product, and your children are their prospects. SIECUS, founded by Planned Parenthood's medical director. Planned Parenthood's medical director. Planned Parenthood's medical director. It came from Planned Parenthood. SIECUS changed their name a year and a half ago. It doesn't just say SIECUS anymore. They added something. Go Google this right now. Resilient listeners, if you're still listening to me rant. It's called SIECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change. Their new name is Sex Ed for Social Change, Judd. Wait, but I thought this was about the birds and the bees. I was told that sex education decreases the unwanted pregnancy rate because it teaches kids how to be safe, and so therefore it's less abortion. So why don't conservatives support sex education? Sex ed for social change. Oh, it's almost like you've got a bigger agenda to change the social fabric. I covered this on my show a few months ago, Chad. This is so hard to even explain or put into words. Planned Parenthood puts out vile, obscene, describe everything sexually kind of videos for minors, and they use them in high schools. I was watching one of these videos that Planned Parenthood produced. It has their branding on it. It has their branding in the background. They created a video, just like your beautiful set. They created a set that they filmed this thing on. It's a sex ed video talking about sexuality, that you should have lots of orgasms, you should experiment. If it's a boy and boy, that's great. If it's a girl and girl, you should do. And so this person's explaining all this stuff for minors. And this is a public high school thing that's been used in schools. And there's a mannequin in this set. Again, if you want this, go subscribe to the Seth Gruber Show. I did an Instagram reel on this too. There's a mannequin on the Planned Parenthood sex ed video set shoot. And there's a shirt that they put on the mannequin. This is produced by Planned Parenthood. Guess what the shirt on the mannequin says in the background of a sex ed video created by Planned Parenthood? It says, sex ed is power. Sex ed is power? I'm sorry, I thought you just told me sex ed was about the birds and the bees and helping kids be responsible. If you're going to have sex, make sure you wear protection. No, that's never what it's been about. They understand that if you can incite youngsters to a sexual frenzy, if you can expose minors to any and all forms of sexual activity, even the most vile and dangerous, you can change the social fabric forever. If you can destroy the innocence of young minds, this is something that our good brother Jacob Booyens talks a lot about, right? That when you the Bible says, like, don't arouse passion before it's time, right? If you can get kids doing sex stuff when that's supposed to be saved for marriage and God's way of doing things, it ruins the innocence of children. They're more likely to act out sexually. They're more likely to have broken relationships. Sex was something that God created not just for procreation, first and foremost, but for like literal, like emotional and spiritual ties. Like when you have sex with someone, you're not just like having fun. Like you're creating heartstring, emotional ties with this person. Because God created sex not just to be physical, but to be spiritual. So when you live like that and you indulge those things as a youngster who's not aware of how this is harming you, and you're certainly not waiting for marriage, it destroys the next generation. Our generation today, Gen Z, Chad, is the most sexually pornography addicted generation in American history. The average age of exposure to pornography right now in America is 8 years old. It was by design. Sex ed is power because sex is powerful to change the social fabric. It's not about sexual education. It's about sexual revolution. So SECUS, sex ed for social change. We use it as a way to change the social fabric. They're admitting it in their own name now. Mary Calderoni found SECUS, leaves Planned Parenthood in 1964, and she invites someone onto her board. Now, I like talking about people's board members because it tells me what the founder believes, right? If one of my board members, dude, was like, black people are human vermins, he'd be off the board so quick. But of course, Margaret Sanger's board members were part of the KKK, and she was chill. She was chill with it, you know. So, anyways, that's why that's why it's important to know who people's friends and relationships are, because it tells you the kind of people they are, right? Like the reason I love you is because you're doing kingdom work, right? But if Chad Robichaux were sleeping with minors, I would not be on the Resilient Show, right? Well, I am talking about someone who slept with minors and was a pedophile, and he sat on the board of SECUS that became the pioneer of all the filth in the sex education in the schools. His name was Wardell Pomeroy. Wardell Pomeroy was part of the pro-incest lobby. He gave an interview to Time magazine in 1980 called Attacking the Last Taboo. Well, what was the last taboo? Incest. He sat on the board of SECUS, founded by Planned Parenthood's medical director with seed money provided by Hugh Hefner. He told Time magazine in 1980, he said, incest between children and adults can sometimes be beneficial. He sat on the board for years. He had a gay lover, Wardell Pomeroy, the founding board member of SECUS, behind all the sex education in America. His gay lover was named Alfred Kinsey. Ever heard that name, y'all? Alfred Kinsey has been called the father of the sexual revolution. Margaret Sanger is probably the mother of the sexual revolution, by the way. But who was Alfred Kinsey? Alfred Kinsey was a homosexual, deviant, impotent, probably pedophile, but I'm not sure I can prove that, but probably pedophile. He certainly observed and researched pedophilic behavior in action, even if he himself didn't actually rape a minor, but he had sex with animals, orgies. He's called the father of the sexual revolution. As our men were getting back from defeating the Nazis in World War II, Judd, they're coming back. We've defeated Hitler. We've saved the West. He publishes a book right after that called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. By the way, there's only one other person I know who knows more about this than me. His name's Jacoboyans. Okay. He's the only one I've met who knows more about what I'm sharing with you than me. And he publishes his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. And he says most American men are having sex with farm animals, other men, and cheating on their wives. He says that most American men are doing this. Now, dude, this was 1947 or 1948. And you're like, really? That's like before the sexual revolution. That was before like Woodstock and Free the Nipple movement. Like the 40s, I thought men were pretty like fidelity, like didn't cheat on their wives. Like we're very like, you're like, right. It's all BS. But what he did is he went and interviewed pedophiles and rapists serving lifetime prison sentences and got them to give him their data and their recounting of their sexual crimes performed on minors or farm animals. I'm not joking about this stuff, by the way. And then he publishes this in his book, and he says, I did the data and the research, and turns out this, like most American men cheat on their wives, have gay sex in bathhouses, and diddle farm animals. And so he faked and published fraudulent data to make it sound like the culture was somewhere that it wasn't.
Right. You cherry picked it with.
And where did he get it from? He got it from sexual criminals serving lifetime prison sentences. Two of his most valuable sources of information tell us a lot about how fraudulent his data was. Again, why does all this matter? Because Kinsey's science and Kinsey's books are the number one cited authoritative sources in all of Seths's sex ed curriculum. So do you see how I told you I would connect everything and prove it to you? Planned Parenthood's medical director, Mary Calderon. Hugh Hefner gives the funding. Seths, sex ed for social change. Sex ed is power. Planned Parenthood in 2024 says on their own website they're the largest provider of comprehensive sexuality education. But comprehensive sexuality education was manufactured by Seths. It was founded by Planned Parenthood's medical director that had a board member who was a pedophile and part of the pro-incest lobby. And that board member was Gay Lovers with Alfred Kinsey. And all of Seths's first study guides that were being used in America's public schools that became the beginning of CSE before John Amanchukwu started speaking at school board meetings. All of their authoritative sources come from the Kinsey Institute and Kinsey's book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. So there, I just gave you that. This is why I'm connecting it all. Guess who his two most cited and authoritative sources were? One guy was named Rex King.
Okay.
And by the way, if you want to know all this stuff, get my book, The 1916 Project. If you want to go deeper than that, buy every book by a woman named Judith Reisman. Judith, Judith Reisman. Reisman. She passed a few years ago and I never got to meet her. She's a saint. You know, Judith Reisman passed away while on the phone with Jacoboyan's sister.
Oh, man.
She passed away.
Jacob's, I've interviewed him before in another show, but he's coming back on this show.
He is one of the most unique, powerful, godly, masculine, unrelenting men I know.
Yeah,
I want to be like Jaco when I grow up.
Incredible.
But his sister was trafficked and they got her back.
Yeah.
And now she helps write legislation to stop sex trafficking at the state level with Jacoboyan's ministries. Well, Judith Reisman died while on the phone with his sister. And I never got to meet Judith Reisman. She died a few years ago. But if you just want like a broad, comprehensive, but accessible treatment of this, get my book, The 1916 Project. If you want to go down the rabbit's hole, buy every book by Judith Reisman. Some of them are hard to find and they're very expensive because they're not being republished because like Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, the left wants to bury the coverage and history of how all this stuff happened. So why do I know all this? Because I'm a weird homeschool kid and you should be too. By the way, isn't it funny that like when I was being homeschooled, the homeschool kids were weird and the public schools kids were hip, right? Now it's like the public schools kids that don't know what a woman is and all the homeschool kids are brilliant and cool. Yeah, anyways. Rex King becomes one of Kinsey's number one data sources. You have to understand, Kinsey lusted after data. Like he got hard up for it. Like it was his thing. Like he wanted data. He wanted to interview anyone that was doing weird sexual stuff. And give me your data. Tell me about that. And he would document and write it all down, publish it to make it look like that's what most American men were doing. Well, one of those guys was Rex King. Rex King was a sexual omnivore and pedophile who raped and sodomized hundreds of children. And Kinsey encouraged Rex King to continue his research. But what does research mean? It means raping minors. I can prove in both my book and in the research Judith Reisman has done, the letters between Alfred Kinsey and Rex King. He said, "I hope you don't get caught. I wish I could give you credit for your research in my forthcoming volume. It's a bummer I can't give you credit." That's what Kinsey said to Rex King. Why would he not give Rex King credit? Because if he named who his interviewee was, then the police would go and arrest him.
Right.
So you have to understand the basis of the sex ed revolution in America as we know it today. And you just had John Amanchukwu on.
Yeah.
Who's like going viral for speaking at school board meetings. Guys, the basis of that education comes from bestiality, pedophile, groomer, impotent revolutionaries covering up for and carrying water for pedophiles and sexual criminals and not reporting them to the authorities, even though they knew the illegal actions they were doing, because if they reported Rex King, they wouldn't be able to interview him anymore, and then fake his data to make it sound like that's what most American dads and men were doing. And then there's one more. And this is why, Chad, we're going to be friends for a long time, because I'm only scratching the surface and we're at like 2 hours. And I actually haven't even gone down the rabbit hole. I'm giving you like summary stuff because I'm that big of a nerd. One other. You ready for one other?
Let's hear it.
His name was Dr. Fritz von Balusak.
Balusak?
Yeah.
The 15-year-old inside of me is giggling right
His
now.
name was Dr. Fritz von Balusak. Chad, can I just say, I think sometimes God has a sense of humor.
Yeah, he does.
Have you heard of the Democrat legislator in California? His name's Scott Wiener.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I think sometimes God lets these people be named this. You know what I mean? It's almost like us trying to say, I'm trying to warn you. Yeah. By the way, Scott Wiener at a pride rally wearing a shirt that says California. California, not California, California. Scott Wiener, he's wearing a shirt where the California bear is having sex with the state of California. He's humping the state of California. That's Scott Wiener. Guess what kind of bill Scott Wiener has written that became law and signed by Gavin Newsom, Aunt Nancy Pelosi's nephew. Scott Wiener's responsible for the bill that allowed men to go into women's prisons if they said they were girls. So they could be transferred to a women's prison.
Yeah.
Because turns out Tommy is actually Tiffany. And guess what started happening?
They got raped.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, female inmates started getting pregnant in California. But I thought that Tommy was Tiffany. So if Tommy's Tiffany, then how does he have sperm? And so then Scott Wiener authors another bill that provides tax-funded abortions for female prison inmates because Tommy, who's now Tiffany, is raping them and impregnating them. Scott Wiener's responsible for another bill in California, by the way. I hope this goes viral. Do you understand the kind of people that the Democrat Party laud and support and celebrate? Scott Wiener authored a bill that Newsom signed that says if you have sex with a minor who's 10 years or younger in the age gap between the pedophile and the minor, then you no longer have to automatically register on the California sex offender list.
12 to 22 years old gap.
Exactly. So, you raped, you had sex with a minor who was 10 years younger than you? You don't have to automatically register on the sex offender list in California anymore.
There's no consensual sex with a minor.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the same thing with Kinsey. Kinsey's second major source of information was named Dr. Fritz von Balusak.
I love that.
Okay. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not injecting meaning into that. I'm just telling you what his name is. Dr. Fritz von Balusak, Chad, ran a concentration camp in Nazi-occupied Poland. He ran one of Hitler's concentration camps.
He sounds like a Balusak.
Exactly. He absolutely does. And Fritz von Balusak somehow escaped the Nuremberg trials. Dr. Fritz would give Polish and Jewish children the option between him or the gas chamber. Meaning, I'll rape you and you can live, or you can go take a shower. And I think you know what I mean by a shower. Like a Nazi shower.
Like a gas chamber shower.
Like a gas chamber. He raped and sodomized his own children and hundreds of Jewish and Polish children over a 20-year period. He escaped the Nuremberg trials. Years later, he got indicted for a sex murder of a minor. I think her name was La Salette. I have it in my book. When Kinsey died, Paul Gebhard took over the Kinsey Institute, which, by the way, is at Indiana University. So Paul Gebhard, I found one of his admissions. Okay, this is a guy who took over the Kinsey Institute. All of Kinsey Institute, all of its science is the source that's cited by Seekis and Planned Parenthood to justify their sex ed revolution. Dr. Fritz von Balusek was later arrested for raping and murdering a young girl. Paul Gebhard, who took over the Kinsey Institute when Kinsey died, admitted in his own writings that they had covered up for one of their interviewees after he was criminally indicted for a sex murder in Germany, and that Kinsey had letters with this Dr. Fritz von Balusek where he asked him to continue his research and continue sending it to him at Indiana University. And Paul Gebhard, who took over the Kinsey Institute, says that him and Kinsey refused to hand those letters over to the authorities that would have allowed them to corroborate the crimes that German courts were alleging against Dr. Fritz von Balusek to protect him so they can continue getting his data. We're talking about a concentration camp Nazi pedophile child rapist. And Kinsey made it sound like his sex crimes and Rex King's sex crimes came from interviews with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different men, even though they were only two sources. He publishes in his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male in 1947 or 1948, and says this is what most American men are doing. So if that's the case, Chad, Kinsey said, don't we need to change the laws then? Because these laws are too strict and stringent. And if we enforce the laws on the books, it means that your uncle, your dad, and your brother are all probably going to get arrested because they're all doing sexual acts that would be illegal. But most American men weren't doing that stuff. It was all fraudulent data. So this becomes the basis for the sexual revolution, for decreasing penalties against rapists, decreasing laws that protected marriage, children, and the family, and ushered in the sexual revolution as we know it. And that's why Kinsey's called the father of the sexual revolution. In college, a young man named Hugh Hefner, who was a virgin at the time, met someone named Alfred Kinsey. And he gets radicalized. Hugh Hefner would call himself Kinsey's prophet and Kinsey's pamphleteer. Almost every photo available of Alfred Kinsey, he's in a tweed suit and a bow tie. It was his style. It's what he always wore. Why did Hugh Hefner pick a bunny with a bow tie? What do bunnies do? They hump. Well, what's the premise behind the entire sexual revolution, going all the way back to Charles Darwin, to his cousin, Francis Galton, eugenics? Kinsey called himself a eugenicist, by the way. To Havelock Ellis, Sanger's mentor and adulterous affair partner. What's the common denominator? The physical world is all that matters. There's no spiritual world. You're just an animal. You're just a pound. You're a meat puppet. And one day you'll die and take a dirt nap. There's no spiritual realm. So if it feels good, do it. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die.
And that's the history of Planned Parenthood.
If you're a bunny, if you're an animal, if it's an animal kingdom, why not live like an animal? Indulge any appetite whenever you have it. Utilitarianism. Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, all the way back to the 1500s. The gauge of morality is whether it increases pleasure and decreases pain. It's utilitarianism. All this stuff is connected. So of course, Playboy, the mascot, becomes a bunny. That's Kinsey's bow tie. That's Kinsey's bow tie. It was Hugh Hefner's hat tip to his mentor, Alfred Kinsey. Last statement on this. You want to know how Alfred Kinsey died, guys? By masturbating too much. It's called orchitis.
Oh, there's a term for this.
No, I'm serious. You want to talk about poetic justice? Alfred Kinsey died from jacking off too much. It's called orchitis. That's how he died. Bad seed yields a bitter harvest, doesn't it? That's Planned Parenthood's role in the culture of death, eugenics, Nazism, sterilizations. Oh, by the way, remember, Planned Parenthood came out of the sterilization eugenics movement. She called for sterilization and segregation camps. She celebrated the Supreme Court decision that allowed the state to forcibly sterilize people they didn't want having kids. Planned Parenthood is the second largest provider of what today? Chemically castrating and sterilizing transgender drugs. They're just doing what they've done all since the beginning.
Yeah.
They're sterilizing people. They believe we have to reduce the world population to worship Mother Gaia because there's too many people on planet Earth. All this stuff is connected.
They're doing what they were founded to do, and we're paying for it as U.S. taxpayers.
Yep. And that's why we put it all together in a movie and in a book that comes out tomorrow on X, on Twitter. We're trying to get Elon Musk to watch it. Remember, Elon said he's setting out to destroy the woke mind virus?
Yeah.
So basically, my movie is the origins of the woke mind virus. If you want to know where the woke mind virus came from and how integrated it is with our culture today, watch the 1916 Project streaming on X, on Twitter right now. Go to the 1916project.com, the 1916project.com.
Two more questions for you. One, I'm circling back to the beginning. Tell us about the White Rose Resistance.
So
can we get it now? Did we get enough to get?
That's right.
Okay,
we did.
okay.
A bunch of kids in their 20s in 1942 were horrified at what was happening. 1942, by the way, is when Planned Parenthood changed their name from the American Birth Control League to Planned Parenthood. Do you want to know why she chose to change the name to Planned Parenthood in 1942? Because everyone knew that Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood weren't just part of the eugenics movement, they were the eugenics movement. And by 1942, this guy Hitler had given the phrase, the term eugenics, a slightly negative connotation.
Yeah.
And so Sanger had to distance herself and distance the American Birth Control League from all of these revolutionaries and ideas and the horrific.
Well, she was mentored to be a little
consequences
more quiet, right? She was mentored to be a little more.
Well, I guess we
stealthy.
could say if Sanger had a scalpel approach to eugenics, then Hitler had a sledgehammer approach to eugenics. But they believed the same things, that the unfit, the undesirables, the dead weights of humanity, the human weeds, should not be allowed to reproduce or have children. And ultimately, they should just be exterminated. Hitler was just a little bit more rough and tumble in his approach to eugenics, but Sanger believed the same things. It's very important to say that. So now that you understand that the Nazis got their eugenic ideas and blueprints from us, from American leftists, from Sanger, Lothrop Stoddard, Madison Grant, and her friends, and board members and financiers and guest writers for her magazine. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, one of her guest writers and friends was named Ernst Rudin, who wrote for Planned Parenthood's magazine, advised Sanger, was friends, spoke at the same conferences. Ernst Rudin designed Hitler's euthanasia program. I know, you're like, I told you there would not have been a market for my film before 2020. People would have said, too much Alex Jones. You listen to too much Alex Jones. By the way, he's been right about a hell of a lot of things.
Yes.
So, but this is how integrated this stuff is, guys. So these kids in their 20s are facing the same ideas.
In Germany.
But in Germany. And these Nazis just took Sanger's ideas a little bit further. And this young woman named Sophie Scholl, 21-year-old young gal, was walking the sidewalks in Munich in 1942, Chad. And she finds a paper on the ground. It's called Leaflets of the White Rose. She starts to read this, bro. And her heart is stirred to action. It said things like, if you know, why do you not act? They said, we are the White Rose Resistance. We are your bad conscience, and we will not leave you alone. They said, we are Christian and we are German. Therefore, we are responsible for Germany. And these were leaflets that were blasting the crimes of the Nazis and asking good people to wake up. They said things like, down with Hitler. I mean, this is not a safe thing to publicize and spread. And Sophie's heart stirred to action. Her father had spent some time in prison for publicly criticizing Hitler. So like me, she came from good stock. And she wants to join whatever this White Rose Resistance is. She's reading this leaflet and she's thinking, this sounds a lot like my brother Hans. He talks like at dinner like this all the time. It sounds like one of his rants. Turns out that the White Rose Resistance was not only co-founded, it was being run by her older brother Hans, a 24-year-old young man who was just trying to protect his little sister. This is 1942. So resisting Hitler and speaking out is not a safe thing to do. He just was trying to protect Sophie. Well, she joins. She becomes the youngest member and the only female of the White Rose Resistance. And for the rest of 1942 and early parts of 1943, Hans and Sophie, 24 and 21 years old, and their other friends in their 20s start staying up late, writing and printing and then distributing these anti-Nazi leaflets. They would go to Frankfurt, they would go to Berlin, they would spread it all around Munich. And then on February 18th, 1943, Hans and Sophie took things to the next level. and they walked onto the campus at the University of Munich. We filmed there in my movie, The 1916 Project, and they start distributing their leaflets all around the university. And then in this iconic scene, as the bell rings and class is dismissed, Hans and Sophie walk 3 stories. Sophie walks 3 stories up to the 3rd floor balcony and throws hundreds of leaflets 3 stories down to the atrium below. Now, you know what happens when you throw paper? It goes everywhere. The janitor, a committed Nazi, caught Sophie in the act, called the Gestapo on the spot, and Hans and Sophie were arrested on February 18th, 1943. They spent 4 days in prison, being brutally interrogated, physically assaulted. I think one of their interrogations lasted 9 hours. They refused to rat out or implicate any of their other friends or members of the White Rose Resistance. Unfortunately, they found incriminating evidence of one leaflet that Hans wasn't able to swallow and eat, and they found it in his pocket, and it was his friend's writing, Christoph Probst. So they arrested Christoph Probst, whose wife was in the hospital recovering from childbirth for a daughter he'd never meet. The 3 of them would have their heads chopped off 4 days later. They were taken to a guillotine. But what was fascinating about the White Rose Resistance is that they were Christians. They believed that this was Christianity lived out. They believed that the church should speak up, that you shouldn't passively allow evil and stand by and do nothing because you want to keep your 501c3 status, or you want to be invited to those nice parties, and you want your leftist friends to speak well of you, and you don't want your boss who's a leftist at your corporation to fire you if you speak out. They believe that people should raise their voice. And Sophie in particular has come to represent my movement, Chad. We named our 3rd daughter after her, Sophie Sunshine. And Sophie said some things at the end of her life that are so incredibly divinely inspired that it's impossible to picture a 21-year-old today in America with this level of clarity and courage. And she said, the real damage is caused by all of those millions out there who just want to survive. It's the honest men and women who just want to be left in peace. Those who don't want their little lives disturbed by anything bigger than themselves. Those with no sides and no causes. Those who won't take measure of their own strength for fear of antagonizing their own weaknesses. Those who don't like to make waves their enemies. You know, those for whom freedom, honor, truth, and principles, it's just literature, just words. Those who live small, die small. It's the reductionistic approach to life. If you keep it small, you'll keep it under control. If you don't make any noise, the boogeyman won't find you. But it's all an illusion because they die too. She said those people who roll up their spirits into tiny little balls so as to be safe. Safe? From what? Life is always on the edge of death. Narrow streets lead to the same place as wide avenues, and a little candle burns itself out, just like the flaming torch does. But I choose my own way to burn. I choose my own way to burn. Who talks like that at 21? That's a young woman with the lion of the tribe of Judah roaring inside of her. Her bravery and calm so freaked out her own prison guards who were like, who are you? The Nazi prison guards, Chad, let Hans and Sophie meet with their parents in a side room at Stadelheim prison right before they were escorted to the guillotine. And Sophie's mother looked Sophie in the eyes and said, remember Jesus, Sophie. And Sophie responded, yes, but you too, Mama. You too. According to the executioner who chopped their heads off, Chad, he was later interviewed. Sophie's final words, the sun still shines. And Hans's final words, like William Wallace, was freedom. Over the next 9 months, Chad, they found the rest of their friends in their 20s of the White Rose Resistance, murdered all of them. Because they were killed on February 22nd, 1943, they missed a meeting that had been arranged for them 4 days later that meeting would have been with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The guy who tried to assassinate Hitler, Valkyrie.
Yeah.
The pastor, martyr, prophet, spy. His biography, our friend Eric Metaxas. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of the most prophetic voices of the 20th century, had come to meet with Hans and Sophie. But they had been beheaded 4 days before that. So, Chad, we say that while rose blossoms may perish in the fall, they reappear in the spring. And while all of the members of the White Rose Resistance were found and executed, their sacrifice has planted the good seeds, not the bad seeds of the Sangers and the Kinseys and the Hugh Hefners, but the good seeds of Christian resistance. And your sacrifice, church, will water those seeds of resistance. So maybe one day, thousands will be awakened and stirred to action. The white rose will blossom again, and we as the church, like Sophie, can say, the sun still shines. This is our hour. This is our moment. There is such a thing as a Rubicon line, Chad. It's the point of no return, where you don't get your society and civilization back. I don't know if we're past that point. If we're not, we're flirting with it. We're flirting with the Rubicon line. We have tolerated evil and wickedness for so long in America that we become numb. We become dead. Our hearts don't break anymore for the things that anger our Lord's heart. We need the church to wake up. So the 1916 Project is an initiative of my ministry, the White Rose Resistance 2.0. We're trying to fulfill the legacy and build the army of Christian resistance that Hans and Sophie dreamed of, but never saw realized, to bring a grinding halt to our culture of death today before it's too late. So if you guys want to be part of the White Rose Resistance, you got to make this film go viral, guys. Like, you understand, if Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk and Trump tweet out this film, like, we can save thousands of babies, awaken thousands of Christians. The church was always plan A. We need to expose the deeds of darkness, Ephesians 5:11. We need to give God a reason to show America mercy. We need to do the kinds of work that the church fathers and the church heroes before us were willing to die to stand up for. But we're so Netflix and chill and Andy Stanley, Rick Warren live stream church services. We're fat and lazy and impotent, and we're not good anymore. We're not being used to preserve anything. Salt and light. We've lost our saltiness. We're not preserving anything that matters anymore. So we're making this film and this book, Chad, not just to educate, but to awaken people. We're launching chapters around the country. We're doing a conference in DC called Life or Death Con. Come on out, resilient listeners. January 23rd, Washington, D.C., the Westin, downtown D.C. It's called Life or Death Con, baby. In Deuteronomy, God says, I've set before you life and death. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. That's lifeordeathcon.com. Coming out. Jakob Boyens is speaking. Eric Metaxas is speaking. Ali Bestucky is speaking. Come on out. It's going to be powerful. We're doing The Last Stand in June, Chad. I want you there. TheLastStand.com. We're taking back June. June is Life Month. It's not Legion Month. It's not Pride Month. It's Life Month. Roe got overturned in June. Roe got overturned on the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. We're going to have 8,000 people in San Diego. We're going to worship. We're going to pray. We're going to repent. And we're going to ask God to move. TheLastStand.com. Tickets will be available soon. Come join us. Be part of Christian resistance. Get the film to go viral. Become a monthly partner of our ministry at thewhiterose.life. Support us. You get a battle box in the mail. You become a pro-life ninja. All right? You get my book. You join our book club. We talk about books. We equip you. You're the solution. You're the plan A. You're an American. You have self-government. You should be a Christian. You should serve Jesus, who's the greatest former fetus to have ever existed, who became an unborn child to save you from your sins. We have to stop waiting for someone else to do the work that God has called his people to do. Well, that's what we're doing.
I want to challenge the pastors in this because you have people like 21-year-old like Sophie that could do what she did, have the courage that she did. But you have pastors in communities across the country, and it's not all of them because we know some good ones.
Yeah.
Pastor Steve, Pastor Troy, Alan Jackson,
yep.
Joby, like Josh Beard, who I just went this weekend. Like there's some amazing Jack Hibbs. Like there's some amazing, but large in part, sadly, and I wish I didn't have to say large in part. Large in part, pastors in America lack the moral courage to stand on that pulpit on a Sunday morning in front of their community and speak about what you're speaking about, to speak for life, to speak against the sexual indoctrination and sexual mutilization of children. And I would say, and I said this on live with Jim Daly and Focus on the Family, if a pastor has had the courage to speak on those things, you step off the pulpit and find a new job. I mean, there is no more room for it. This isn't about politics.
Yeah,
like,
go find
people
another
say,
job.
Yeah, I mean,
Go be a plumber. If you're not willing to preach the full counsel of God and bring it into conflict with the demonic ideologies of today, go do something.
Eric Metaxas talks about this all the time. He had 18,000 churches in Nazi Germany. 3,000 were for Nazism. 3,000 were led by Dietrich Bonhoeffer to speak against it. 12,000 sat silent and said, we're not going to get political. And the Holocaust happened because of their silence. We cannot afford to be silent anymore. And this is not an issue of politics. You can't let them hijack these topics and say, you can't speak on this because it's political. We have to get political.
That's right.
We're obligated for things like this to get political. If not, we turn it over to the secular politicians of this world.
That's exactly right. Dominion is inevitable.
Yes.
Dominion is inevitable. Someone's religion and someone's worldview will take charge.
So I would challenge any pastor listening who cares about this, and every pastor should care about this, to contact you on your website and be involved. Share this film.
Yeah, I would love to come and speak to your people. I have a team of speakers if I can't make it. So the White Rose Resistance, our website's thewhiterose.life. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes. Thewhiterose.life. You can host a screening of the 1916 Project at your church, which is super cool. You came to one of those.
I did.
So even after the film is out digitally, you can host a screening for your people to educate and mobilize the church. And that's the 1916project.com. Meet us in DC for Life or Death Con. That's lifeordeathcon.com. And we're going to take back life and we're going to wake up the church. And then June of 2025, The Last Stand in Southern California. We're trying to book, we've almost booked Tucker, but we've got Metaxas, Ali Beth Stuckey, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Pastor Steve Smotherman, John Cooper from Skillet, Danny Goki. And so this is the time for the American church to rise. A resistance is rising, and it's fun. And you know why, Chad? You know this? Because we were made to fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's within us. So, yeah, man, I'm so thankful, not for you just being here, for what you're doing. I'm very proud of you, and I know God is too. Brother. And we have some sponsors for the show that love you, love all our guests, and want to support you and what you do. And I mean, look, you have to have some fun too. And right. You know, I love shooting guns. I know you're Pro 2A guy,
that's right,
so
that's right.
we want to kind of hook you up. We have several gifts. I'll save the gun for last, but Bio Pro is a supplement that I use. It's actually a non-synthetic, all natural,
amazing
alternative for HGH, human growth hormone.
So it's not mRNA?
No, it's not mRNA. Yeah, Dr. Fauci did not endorse this. This is actually.
Oh, that's all I need to know. Fauci didn't endorse it. Okay.
Yeah, you're not gonna have a heart attack from it. But I use this. It helps me sleep, especially like before I speak. And you know, you travel. I know we're speaking all the time. You got to travel and you can't get like 2 hours sleep. It helps me get some sleep. So
awesome.
We have BioPro for you. We have another one of our sponsors, BioAccelerator. They're a stem cell company out in Scottsdale, Arizona. Clinics in Medellin, Colombia. Awesome. Amazing people. And by the way, ethically, there's no aborted babies involved in that.
Yep.
And then Allied Wealth Management, a finance company that's a big part of the show. Then we have Smith & Wesson Firearms, Vortex Optics, and Gators Glasses to keep your eyes safe when you're shooting. So we got some Gators Glasses for you.
Very epic.
We have, we're talking about this, so we have a Vortex makes some of the most incredible glass optics for binos, for scopes to get this incredible Vortex scope right here. But this is a Fury HD 5000. So it's not only a binoculars, but it's also a rangefinder. It's like amazing. 2-in-1. And this thing is absolutely incredible. Like, I have one. I love this thing. You're going to have a blast with it.
Well, with what Bill Gates wants to do to our meat, we may need to start killing a lot more of our own animals.
Yeah,
anyways, right?
You got to. And in case you have to see them coming.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Amazing.
And then we have... we talked about this before, because you had wanted a 1911, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna hook you up with 1911. Then you went out and bought a Smith & Wesson 1911, so I'm like, oh, you beat me to it. But this is the Smith & Wesson's M&P 2.0. This thing is absolutely awesome. It's new out. It has the precision point trigger. Has it's set up for to put out a light on it. It's pre-cut for an optic, and right now I have the Vortex Defender ST on it.
It's amazing.
And then it is dual ported, so it keeps it, which means that instead of the guys like lifting the gun up, it keeps it super flat. Has a lot of things on it. One of the things I liked about most that shows that Smith & Wesson's listens to their actually customers, which is good for any company, is they put this gas port on it that shoots the gas away from the optic in the gun. So the first gun I've seen that has that, and it's just absolutely awesome. And
that's amazing. Pro gun is pro life. I care about the sanctity of life, and therefore, if you want to kill innocent people, we should have armed security at every public school and private school in America protecting American children to send a message to every would-be shooter. You try to come kill American children, you forfeit your right to life.
Just like
pro-gun is pro-life.
Just like we have a Congress, right? Imagine if our schools were as safe as the halls of Congress.
Amazing.
And
Very cool. Thank you, brother.
Oh, absolutely. Last thing we have for you is the Mighty Oaks Foundation swag bag. It's my foundation.
Oh, awesome.
I found it.
Yeah, I know. I love Mighty Oaks.
So, there you go.
Thank you, brother. So proud of you.
No,
thanks for everything.
Thanks for having me on. God bless you. Guys, I was so pumped about this episode, but we have more to come this month. We have some incredible guests coming up, and I'll see you next week. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled, and you don't want to miss it.